You're listening to Mia Horror Stories, and today's story is The Historic Prison Tour Has Extra Cells After Midnight. The screen will stay completely black, letting your imagination do all the work. No visuals, no noise, just a story that creeps under your skin. Don't skip a second, because every detail builds to the chilling end you won't want to miss. The first thing that went wrong was the head count. It was not dramatic. Nobody screamed. No alarm sounded. The emergency lights did not flicker, and no masked figure stepped out from behind the bars. I simply counted 12 visitors in the corridor when the booking sheet said 11. I counted again. 12. "Keep moving, folks," I said, holding my lantern high enough to catch faces without shining it directly into anyone's eyes. The floor slopes near the old drainage channel. Shoes scraped over stone. A woman laughed quietly when her husband grabbed her elbow. Someone's coat zipper tapped against an iron railing with a thin, regular ping. I counted a third time. 11. That was how the midnight tour began. My name is Daniel Mercer, 32, male, and at the time I was the evening operations supervisor at Warden's Gate Historic Prison in western Pennsylvania. The title sounded more important than the job. Most nights, I checked fire exits, reset motion sensors, answered questions about parking refunds, and reminded seasonal employees not to use the condemned stairwell in the administration block. I had taken the position because I needed something steady after my father died. That is the simple version. The less flattering version is that I had quit a sales job in Pittsburgh after freezing during a client presentation. I stood in front of 16 people with a slide deck behind me and could not make my mouth form the first sentence. My chest tightened. My hands went numb. One of my coworkers had to lead me into the hallway while everyone pretended to check their phones. I told people I hated corporate work. I did hate it, but I also hated knowing that panic could take my body away from me in public. Warden's Gate was easier. The prison had rules, routes, keys, and doors that either opened or did not. Stone did not judge you. Iron did not remember when you embarrassed yourself. The Midnight Tour was a new program designed to carry us through the slow months between Halloween and Christmas. The prison sat on a wooded hill outside the town of Bellwether, about an hour east of Pittsburgh, where the old steel country began breaking into ridges and narrow valleys. The state had closed the facility in 1987. A preservation trust bought it 11 years later, stabilized 3 cell blocks, and turned the rest into a museum. The tour usually ended at 9. Midnight was marketing. Our director called it atmosphere without fabrication. We lowered the lights, gave visitors battery lanterns, and focused on prison routines after dark: count, lockup, medical calls, guard rotations. No actors, no jump scares, no ghost stories unless a visitor asked. And even then, we stuck to documented accounts, instead of pretending a shadow was an executed inmate. That was the rule. The guide working with me that night was Lena Voss, 26, female, a graduate student from Germany who had moved to Pennsylvania for a museum studies program. She walked at the rear of the group with a radio clipped to her coat and a ring of replica keys at her belt. Lena was precise about facts and openly contemptuous of paranormal television. When visitors asked whether the prison was haunted, she usually answered, "It is full of mold, unstable masonry, and unpaid invoices. Those are the confirmed dangers." She caught my eye from the back of the corridor and lifted one finger. "Wait." I slowed the group beside cell 14. The west cell block smelled stronger after rain. Wet limestone, rust, old wood soaked and dried so many times that it had developed a sweet, rotten odor beneath the dust. Water moved somewhere inside the wall, tapping at irregular intervals. Lena stepped close. "You counted them?" she asked. 3 times, and 12, then 11. She looked past me at the visitors. "Maybe one came out of the exhibit room. There's no other access." "Then you counted someone twice." Her voice was matter of fact, which was useful. I had hired her partly because she did not dramatize problems. If a visitor fainted, she checked breathing before shouting. If a breaker tripped, she found the panel instead of blaming the building. I nodded. Probably. She studied me for another second. "You're doing the thumb thing," she said. I looked down. I had been rubbing the pad of my right thumb over the edge of my thumbnail hard enough to whiten the skin. "I'm fine." I did not ask. Behind us, the group had gathered around the open door of cell 14. The original steel bunk remained bolted to the wall. On the mattress platform sat a folded gray blanket and a dented aluminum cup, both reproductions. Our preservation staff had added them to help visitors understand how little space prisoners had. A man in a tan field jacket leaned into the cell. Frank Dwyer, 58, male, had introduced himself at check-in as a retired corrections officer from Ohio. He had the square, heavy posture of someone accustomed to standing through long shifts. Since the tour began, he had corrected 2 dates on our display signs and tested one barred door with his shoulder after Lena asked him not to touch it. 6 by 8, he asked. 6 feet 4 inches by 8 feet 2, Lena said. Frank nodded as if she had passed an exam. Single occupancy, originally, doubled after 1963. Figures. Beside him stood Marisol Dwyer, 54, female, his wife, a public school librarian with silver-framed glasses and a careful way of placing her feet. She had admitted before the tour that she disliked enclosed spaces, but had bought the tickets for Frank's birthday. "Can we not stand inside this one?" she asked. Frank glanced back. "Nobody s making you." "I know, I'm asking you." He came out of the cell. That small exchange told me more about them than the introductions had. Frank liked testing limits. Marisol liked keeping peace until peace required her to speak plainly. At the front of the group, a young man raised his phone. Evan Price, 23, male, was filming the tour for a channel devoted to abandoned buildings and restricted places. The Warden's Gate was neither abandoned nor restricted in the areas he had paid to visit. He wore an expensive camera strapped over his chest and kept checking the viewer count on his live stream. "Daniel," he said, "can you say the thing about how many inmates died here? I can tell you the documented number. That's what I mean. 47 deaths while the prison was operating. most from illness, violence, or suicide. 2 executions took place before the electric chair was moved to the state facility in Rockview. Evan turned the camera toward himself. 47 confirmed deaths, guys. Do not add confirmed, as if there are unconfirmed ones, Lena said. A few people laughed. The sound moved oddly in the corridor. It traveled up the open center of the cell block, struck the steel catwalks, and came back thinner. Then a door clanged above us. One hard metallic impact. Everyone looked up. The second-floor walkway was dark, except for low amber bulbs along the rail. All the doors up there had been welded or chained for safety. Building settling, someone asked. Probably a loose inspection panel, I said. That was plausible. The prison shifted constantly with temperature and moisture. Metal expanded. Old latches slipped. Pigeons got into wall voids and struck ductwork. Still, I knew the sound of an inspection panel. That had been a cell door. My radio crackled. 3 seconds of static, then a voice that sounded almost like Lena saying my name. I turned toward her. She had already taken her radio from her coat. Did you call me? No. The radio gave another short burst. Nothing intelligible this time. Interference, she said. Security might be transmitting from the gatehouse. The gatehouse was 200 yards downhill, behind 3 stone walls. Possible, not likely, but possible. I smiled at the visitors. Old building, modern radios. They do not always cooperate. Frank kept looking at the upper tier. How many cells in this block? He asked. 84. He pointed upward. Looks like more. I followed his finger. For a moment, I could not understand what he meant. Then I saw it. At the far end of the second tier, beyond cell 42, there appeared to be another barred doorway where the corridor should have ended against a stone wall. The light above it was off. The opening was only a darker rectangle inside the gloom. I raised my lantern. The beam did not reach that far. When I blinked, the doorway looked like what it should have been, the shadowed recess around a fire hose cabinet. Optical effect, I said. Frank gave a low grunt. Sure. From somewhere behind the group came the soft squeal of a hinge. I turned. Cell 14, which Frank had left open, was closing by itself. Slowly, not floating, not snapping shut. The heavy door moved an inch at a time because the floor sloped and the hinge pins were worn. I caught it before it latched. My hand stung from the impact. See, I said, more loudly than necessary. Gravity. Nobody laughed this time. Story Ledger, section 1 time and place. 11:47 p.m., Friday night. West cell block of Warden's Gate Historic Prison near Bellwether, Pennsylvania. Which characters are present? Daniel Mercer, 32, male Lena Voss, 26, female Frank Dwyer, 58, male Marisol Dwyer, 54, female Evan Price, 23, male 6 other tour visitors. Facts revealed. Daniel supervises evening operations and has a history of panic attacks. The prison is a legitimate museum running a new midnight tour. The building is old, damp, and structurally imperfect. Daniel briefly counted one more visitor than the booking sheet allowed. A chained upper-tier cell door appeared to slam. Radio interference produced something resembling Daniel's name. Unresolved questions. Did Daniel miscount? What caused the upper-tier impact? Why did the far end of the tier, briefly appear to contain another doorway. Current stakes. The tour has only just begun. Daniel must keep the visitors calm, maintain safety, and prevent his own anxiety from undermining his judgment. Seated objects or details that may pay off later. Daniel's master keys, Lena's radio, Evan's live stream camera, the sloping cell block floor, the welded upper tier doors, the fire hose cabinet beyond cell 42, Frank's corrections experience, Marisol's claustrophobia. Introduction, Section 2. We resumed the tour because that was what you did when nothing had technically happened. The door had moved because the floor sloped. The radio had crackled because radios crackled. The noise upstairs had come from metal in an old building. Once you gave each problem a name, it became smaller, manageable. A line item for the maintenance log. I led the group through the central rotunda and into the intake wing. The temperature dropped there. The heating system reached the public lobby and the administration corridor, but not the original processing rooms. So winter air settled into the stone like water in a basin. Our lanterns cast oval patches over the walls. The intake wing was where new prisoners had been searched, photographed, issued uniforms, and assigned numbers. A painted height chart remained visible behind a plexiglass shield. Its black lines had faded to brown. Evan filmed himself standing against it. 6'1" in prison shoes, he said. You are 5'11", said the woman beside him. She was Brooke Price, 24, female, Evan's older sister by 14 months, and the person who had bought both tickets. Brooke worked as an emergency medical technician in Morgantown. She had the exhausted humor of someone who spent too many nights around people making avoidable decisions. Evan angled the camera toward her. Haters in the comments. I'm not in the comments. I'm 6 inches from you. Brooke had been quiet during the first part of the tour, but she watched exits automatically. When Marisol hesitated at a narrow doorway, Brooke moved aside without being asked, giving her room. I liked her immediately. People who noticed space around other people were usually safer in emergencies. This room stayed in use until the prison closed, I said. Booking process could take between 3 and 6 hours, depending on staffing and whether the prisoner required medical attention. Did they strip them here? Frank asked. In the search room through that opening. Lena lifted her lantern toward a tiled chamber. Visitors may look from the threshold. Please do not enter. Several tiles are loose. Frank stepped to the line, but did not cross it. Progress. The calm lasted nearly 10 minutes. I began to feel foolish about the head count. 11 people. Of course, there had only been 11. The corridor was narrow, the lantern light uneven, and Evan kept moving side to frame his shots. I had counted his reflection in one of the plexiglass exhibit panels or mistaken Lena for a guest. Then Evan said, "Where'd that guy go?" The room changed. Not visibly. Everyone simply stopped performing normal behavior at once. Lena turned first. Which guy? The tall guy in the dark hoodie. Brooke lowered his camera with one hand. There isn't a guy in a hoodie. There was. He was behind the older couple. Frank looked at Marisol. No, Marisol said. Nobody was behind us. Evan pulled his phone close and swiped through the live stream replay. His viewers posted messages fast enough that they rolled over one another. "Right there," he said. We gathered reluctantly. On the screen, the video showed the group standing outside cell 14. Frank was partly inside. Marisol waited behind him. Over her left shoulder, near the edge of the frame, a dark vertical shape occupied the corridor. It could have been a person. It could also have been the open door of cell 13. Evan froze the video and enlarged it. The image broke into blocks. "See the hood?" he asked. "I see compression artifacts," Lena said. People in chat saw him. People in chat would see Napoleon if it increased engagement. Brooke handed the phone back. "It's the door." Evan looked annoyed, but also relieved. Frank was not relieved. "You have cameras in here?" he asked me. "Motion cameras. No live monitoring inside the preserved blocks. The footage records locally." "Why no live feed? Budget." "The gatehouse monitors entrances, exits, and the exterior yard. And those motion cameras work, most of them." Lena looked at me. That had not been the answer from our standard script. The truth was that 2 interior cameras had failed during the week. Moisture had corroded their connectors. Maintenance had replaced one, but the camera overlooking the rotunda still dropped offline whenever the temperature fell below 40 degrees. It was 36 outside. "Let's continue," I said. The next stop was the records room, where we kept reproductions of intake ledgers. Visitors usually enjoyed searching for unusual occupations and reading descriptions written by clerks who had reduced entire human beings to height, weight, scars, and charges. Lena opened the display cabinet. The ledger inside was not the reproduction we used. She noticed at the same moment I did. The tour copy had a red cloth cover with the museum logo stamped inside. This book was black, its corners softened by age. Dust lay in the groove beside its spine, but not on the cover itself. Lena did not touch it. "Daniel, I see it." Frank leaned closer. "Original. It should be in archival storage." "Then someone moved it," Brooke said. That was the sensible conclusion. During the day, our collections manager sometimes photographed objects in the records room. A volunteer could have placed the book in the wrong cabinet and forgotten to tell us. The cabinet lock showed no damage. I took my phone out to call the gatehouse. No signal. That was normal inside the stone wings. I used my radio instead. "Base, this is Daniel. Radio check. Static." I tried again. "Base, this is West Interior. Radio check." A click answered, then breathing. Not theatrical breathing. No rasp or growl. Just the soft, uneven sound of air passing near a microphone. Lena held up her own radio. Its transmit light was dark. "Base, identify," I said. The breathing stopped. A man's voice replied, flattened by interference. "Counts wrong." The channel went dead. Nobody spoke for perhaps 2 seconds. Then Frank said, "That your security guy?" Our gatehouse officer that night was a 71-year-old former mail carrier named Howard, who spoke with a heavy local accent and ended every radio transmission with "copy that." The voice had not sounded like Howard. "Probably cross-channel traffic," I said. "We use digital radios," Lena said quietly. I wished she had not. Digital radios could still receive interference under unusual circumstances, but stray transmissions did not usually enter a closed staff channel with words directly related to the current conversation. I felt the first tightening beneath my ribs. Not yet pain, not yet panic, just the early warning. I pressed my thumb against the side of the lantern handle and focused on physical details. Cold metal, leather glove, 4 screws around the battery compartment, a shallow scratch near the switch. I stepped closer, blocking the group's view of my face. "Do you need a minute?" she asked. "No, Daniel," I said. "No." Too sharp, her expression closed slightly. That was another flaw of mine. When I became frightened, I mistook help for observation and observation for judgment. I looked at the black ledger in the cabinet. "We're returning to the lobby," I announced. "There may be a radio issue, and I need to verify something with security." Evan's disappointment was immediate. "Is the tour canceled?" Paused. "Can we stay while you check?" "No." Frank folded his arms. "Nearest exit, through the rotunda, then South Passage." Lena shook her head. "South Passage is closed." "What?" "The fire door alarmed during setup. Howard locked it until maintenance can inspect the contact." That left the same route we had entered through the west cell block. Brooke glanced toward the doorway. "Then we go back that way." A mechanical buzz sounded above us. The intake wing's security light changed from green to red. A second later, somewhere in the corridor behind the records room, an electromagnetic lock released with a heavy internal clunk. I knew every public door in that wing. None of them used electromagnetic locks. Evan lifted his camera again. Lena said, "Put that down." "I'm recording in case." "Put it down." The radio at my shoulder clicked once. Howard's voice came through clearly this time. "Daniel, you copy." Relief almost made me dizzy. "I copy. We've had interference and a lock release in intake. Confirm our group count at entry." A pause. Paper rustled over the radio. Howard said, "Your scanner logged 11 tickets. How many people did you see enter?" Another pause, longer this time. "Camera shows 12. The people around me shifted. Fabric brushed fabric. Someone's shoe squeaked against the tile." I looked at the route back to the west cell block. Then at the dark corridor beyond the records room, where the unfamiliar lock had just opened. "Camera show anyone leave?" I asked. No. Behind the black ledger, the cabinet's mirrored backing caught a dim reflection of the room. For half a second, I thought I saw someone standing in the doorway behind us. I turned. The doorway was empty. Lena was watching me. "We have 2 choices," I said quietly. "We take everyone back through the cell block and find out whether the extra person is still in the building, or we use the service passage behind records and reach the administration wing faster." "You said the service areas aren't on the tour," Brooke said. "They are. Are they safe?" I looked toward the corridor where the lock had released. "They're inspected." That was not the same thing. From the west cell block came a distant metallic impact. One door, then another. A measured sequence moving along the upper tier. Clang, pause, clang, pause. As if someone were walking the row and closing cells one at a time. Frank stared toward the sound. Marisol took his hand. The next impact came closer. I put my key into the records room service door. "Everyone stays together," I said. "No filming. No wandering. We're taking the staff passage." The key turned. But before I pushed the door open, Lena caught my wrist. "Daniel," she whispered, looking at the black ledger. The book had fallen open inside the locked cabinet. A blank page faced upward. Across the top, written in fresh blue ink, was a single line. Midnight count, 12. The blue writing looked fresh because it was fresh. That was the first useful thought I had. Not impossible. Not unexplained. Fresh. Someone had opened the ledger, written the line, and closed it again. The cabinet only appeared secure because nobody had checked the lock before the tour. One of the daytime staff could have staged it as a joke. Evan might have slipped ahead while I was distracted. Frank had spent half his career around institutional locks. There were explanations. The problem was that all of them required somebody to be lying. Lena released my wrist. "Don't touch the cabinet," she said. Evan was already filming. "This is part of it, right?" "No," I said, his camera lowered by an inch. Brooke looked between us. "You're serious?" "Yes." The metallic impacts continued in the west cell block. Clang. 7 seconds, clang. The noise was not moving closer anymore. It had settled into a regular interval, like machinery cycling. "Could it be a hydraulic closer?" Brooke asked. "There are no powered doors in that block," Lena said. Frank stepped toward the records room entrance. "Stay here," I told him. "I'm checking the hall. You're a visitor. I know what a door sounds like, and I know the building." He looked at me with the calm irritation of a man who believed authority should be earned personally, not granted by a name badge. "Then explain 12 people on the camera. I'm trying to get 11 paying guests out safely. You can help by not becoming number 12. Marisol said his name. Frank stopped. The line had sounded sharper than I intended, but it worked. I unlocked the staff passage and opened the door. A smell of hot dust and damp concrete rolled out. The corridor beyond was narrow, unfinished, and lit by bare utility bulbs spaced 20 feet apart. Pipes ran overhead. Some were painted red, others yellow, with stenciled arrows showing flow direction. Flaking insulation wrapped the oldest lines. The passage had been added in the 1950s to connect intake with administration without moving prisoners through public corridors. It was ugly, practical, and usually locked. It was also the fastest route to the lobby. "Single file," I said. "Keep one hand free. Do not touch the pipes." "What happens if the lights go out?" Marisol asked. The question came too quickly. I could see that the corridor was already working on her. Her shoulders had risen toward her ears. She was breathing through parted lips. "The emergency fixtures have battery backups," I said, "and we have lanterns. Does the passage get narrower?" No, that was mostly true. It narrowed by 8 inches near the old laundry junction, but telling her that would not help. Frank moved closer to her, his earlier stubbornness replaced by attention. "You're ahead of me," he said. "I'll be right behind. I don't need managing." "I know." She entered anyway. Lena took the rear, I led. The service door shut behind us with a solid click. I had gone perhaps 15 feet when the nearest ceiling light blinked out. The next one followed, then the next. The darkness moved toward us in sections. "Keep walking," I said. The final bulb above the door went black. Our lanterns became the only light. Someone swore behind me. "It's the circuit," Lena said. Her voice was calm, but her radio was already in her hand. Old ballasts sometimes trip in sequence. Lights don't trip in sequence, Frank said. Emergency transfer relays do. Are these emergency lights? No, then don't tell people. Both of you stop, Brooke said. It was the first time she had raised her voice. The group quieted. A low alarm began somewhere ahead. Not a siren. A steady electronic tone muffled by walls. I recognized it after 2 pulses. The boiler room carbon monoxide detector. Everybody back, I said. Marisol stopped so suddenly that Frank walked into her. What? Evan asked. Turn around. You said this went to administration. It does. We're not using it. The alarm continued. The prison's main boiler sat beneath the administration wing. It had been inspected in October, but the exhaust system was older than I was, and the utility tunnels shared ventilation paths that did not appear on any surviving blueprint. Carbon monoxide had no smell. That made every odor suspicious anyway. Hot dust, old paint, wet stone, the faint exhaust scent that might have been my imagination. Lena moved her lantern over the nearest pipe labels. Detector could be faulty, she said. It could. Brooke understood what I was not saying. How far to fresh air? Back through records, then West Block, then the Rotunda. How long? 4 minutes if the route's clear. The tone changed. 3 fast beeps, a pause, then 3 more. That was not the carbon monoxide alarm. It was the building's evacuation signal. Lena looked at me. Why is it only audible in the tunnel? It is. We all listened. No other alarm echoed from the prison. Only the small wall unit ahead of us. Frank pointed his lantern at the device. That's a smoke detector. He was right. It was mounted above a steel access door 20 feet ahead. The plastic housing had yellowed. A red indicator flashed with each set of beeps. That door goes where? He asked. Boiler access stairs. So the boiler room alarm is local. Yes, then we need to move. I turned back to the records room door and pulled the handle. It did not open. I tried again. The latch moved halfway and stopped against something solid. Is it locked? Brooke asked. It can't lock from this side. I put my shoulder into it. The steel door shifted perhaps a 1/4 inch, then struck something with a dull wooden knock. Something had been placed against it. For several seconds, all I heard was the alarm and the quiet friction of people breathing in a confined space. Then Lena said, someone barricaded it. Evan raised his camera. Brooke slapped her hand over the lens. Not now. I need the light. You have a flashlight. My phone's almost dead. That sounds like your problem. Frank moved past Marisol. Let me try. He braced both hands against the push bar and drove his weight forward. The door jumped in its frame. Whatever stood on the other side scraped across the records room floor, but did not fall. Cabinet, he said. The ledger cabinet is bolted to the wall. What else is in there? Reading table. 2 chairs. Enough to jam a door. He hit it again. Wood scraped. Marisol backed away, bumped the wall, and made a small sound through her teeth. Give her space, Brooke said. There isn't any space, Marisol replied. She was breathing too quickly now. Frank turned from the door. Mari, look at me. No. Look at me. I said no. Then look at the lantern, her eyes fixed on the light in his hand. You've got room, he said. Nothing's touching your chest. Nothing's over your face. Don't narrate it. Okay, just stop talking. He did. I pressed the radio button. Howard, emergency traffic. We're locked in the records service passage. Possible boiler alarm. Send fire and police. Repeat, send fire and police. Static answered. I moved the radio higher. Howard, copy emergency traffic. A voice came through, broken into pieces. West, don't. Howard, repeat. Daniel, do not go. The transmission cut out. Do not go where? Evan asked. I don't know. My chest tightened again. This time it did not stop at warning. The corridor seemed to shorten. The ceiling pipes looked lower than they had a moment earlier. I could feel my pulse in my gums. I knew the sensations. That almost made them worse. Familiar panic carries memory with it. The conference room, the 16 faces, my coworker guiding me out by the elbow while I insisted I was only dehydrated. I put my lantern on the floor so nobody would see it shaking. Lena saw anyway. Daniel, she said, I'm working. You're hyperventilating. I know what I'm doing. No, you know what is happening. Different thing. Frank looked between us. Lena stepped close enough that only I could hear her clearly. Name 5 things. Not now. 5 things you see. We may have carbon monoxide in the tunnel. Then panic is using oxygen you need. I hated her for being right. Red pipe, I said. What else? Yellow valve, gray door, your coat. Exit sign. 4 things you can feel. Floor, my glove, radio clip, key ring. My voice steadied by the last word. The corridor returned to its actual dimensions. Then the boiler access door rattled. One quick movement of the handle. Everyone turned. The handle went still. Is somebody in there? Brooke called. No answer. Frank moved in front of Marisol. The handle lowered again. Slowly this time. The latch clicked, but the door did not open. It appeared to be locked from the other side. Howard, I called. Nothing. Maintenance, Lena tried. A scraping noise came through the door. Metal against concrete. Then 3 hard knocks. Not pipes settling. Knuckles or a tool. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Evan whispered, someone's trapped. Frank shook his head. Or someone wants us to open it. The smoke detector continued beeping above the frame. There was still no visible smoke. Brooke crouched beneath it and studied the indicator. Daniel, does this model detect carbon monoxide too? I don't know. She looked at the printed label. Smoke only. So we could have a fire, Lena said. Or someone pressed the test button, Frank replied. The unit was too high to reach without a ladder, unless someone had activated it remotely or triggered it from the other side of the access door. My radio crackled. Howard's voice came through clearly for less than a second. Fire in admin. Then static swallowed him. The ceiling ventilation fan stopped. The change was immediate. The soft mechanical hum vanished, and the corridor became dense with small sounds. Clothing shifting, Marisol swallowing, the detector's plastic casing vibrating with each beep. Okay, Brooke said. We don't debate anymore. We move away from the boiler. The records door is blocked, Evan said. There has to be another exit, she replied. There is, I said. Everyone looked at me. I pointed down the passage, past the alarmed boiler door. The tunnel branches at the laundry junction. One route reaches the kitchen basement. There's an exterior delivery stair. How far? Lena asked. About 200 yards. And it passes the boiler stairs, Frank said. Yes. No. It doesn't enter the boiler room. You want to take 11 civilians toward a reported fire. The other direction is barricaded. We break the barricade. That could take 5 minutes, maybe 10. Marisol spoke without looking away from the lantern. I can't stay here 10 minutes. Frank's jaw flexed. Brooke stood. She shouldn't. None of us should. Lena checked the seam beneath the boiler access door. No smoke. Fire could be above us, I said. Administration is one level up. Then the delivery stair may still be clear. Another knock struck the access door. This one was weaker. A voice followed. Help. The word was muffled but unmistakable. Marisol looked up. There's someone in there. Frank did not move. Could be the person who barricaded us. Or Howard, Evan said. Howard is in the gatehouse, Lena replied. Was. Brooke stepped toward the access door. Call out again. I raised my voice. Identify yourself. No response. I tried once more. Tell us your name. Something struck the bottom of the door from the other side. Then came a coughing fit. Wet, painful, human. Brooke reached for the handle. Frank caught her wrist. You open that, and smoke comes through. We're done. If someone's injured, you don't know what's behind it. I know what coughing sounds like. And I know what bait looks like. She pulled free. This is not a prison riot. You don't get to treat every person behind a locked door like an inmate. His expression changed at that. Not anger exactly. Recognition. The argument lasted only seconds, but it split the group neatly. Brooke, Evan, and Marisol looked toward the door. Frank looked down the tunnel. The other visitors shifted between them, waiting for someone to sound certain. That someone was supposed to be me. I took out the master ring. The boiler access key was narrow, stamped B4. Daniel, Lena said, we should not open it without fire equipment. If someone is trapped, the alarm could be deliberate. The barricade was deliberate. So we leave them. We call responders and evacuate. The radio is failing. That does not make us responders. The voice behind the door said, please, barely audible. I put the key into the lock. Frank muttered something under his breath. I turned it halfway. The radio on my shoulder burst to life. Daniel, stop, Howard's voice. Clear, close, I froze. Howard, I'm at the gatehouse. Police are coming. Do not open any interior access doors. Who's in the boiler stair? Nobody should be. A violent impact hit the other side of the door. The key twisted against my fingers. Everyone stepped back. Howard continued, his voice breaking under static. Someone accessed the control room. Cameras are looping. I can't see your current position. Fire in administration. No confirmed fire. The panel shows multiple manual alarms. Manual alarms. Someone had pulled them. How long for police? I asked. 8 to 12 minutes. Fire S coming from Bellwether. 8 to 12 minutes might as well have been an hour in that tunnel. Can you unlock the records door remotely? No, that door isn't networked. The person behind the boiler door began hitting it repeatedly. No pattern now, just impact after impact. Brooke covered her mouth. Marisol pressed both hands over her ears. Then the red painted pipe above us gave a sharp metallic pop. A coupling near the ceiling jerked sideways. Brown water sprayed from the joint in a thin, high-pressure stream. It struck the electrical conduit along the wall. The corridor lights, already dead, flashed once in a white-blue burst. Sparks scattered across the wet floor. Someone screamed. I grabbed Lena's coat and pulled her back as the water widened into a fan. It smelled of rust and stagnant heat. "That's the sprinkler main," I shouted. The pipe bucked again. A ceiling bracket tore loose. The line sagged 6 inches. The coupling would not hold much longer. If it failed completely, hundreds of gallons could flood the passage, energize damaged wiring, and make the tunnel impassable. "Move," I yelled, toward the laundry junction. "Now." Frank pushed the group forward. Brooke kept one arm around Marisol. Evan slipped on the first patch of water, caught himself against the wall, and dropped his camera. It hit the concrete hard enough to crack the lens. He bent for it. "Leave it," Brooke shouted. He snatched it anyway. We moved past the boiler access door while the person behind it continued pounding. As I passed, the narrow wired glass window at eye level brightened, not with fire, with a flashlight beam from the other side. For 1 second, a face appeared behind the reinforced glass. A man's face, pale under the harsh light, with blood running from his scalp into one eyebrow. Then another hand reached from behind him and pulled him out of view. The pounding stopped. I stopped too. Lena crashed into my back. "Did you see?" Before I could answer, the sprinkler coupling failed. Water slammed across the corridor. The force knocked a visitor sideways and tore the radio from my shoulder. It skidded beneath the boiler door, where a hand reached through the half-inch gap and dragged it out of sight. The access lock clicked. The door began opening toward us. We ran deeper into the tunnel. We ran until the tunnel split. That sounds cleaner than it was. People do not run well in single file through a flooded service passage. Collide. They slow without warning. They turn their heads toward noises behind them and drift sideways. Lanterns swing. Shoes lose traction. Fear moves through a group unevenly, so the person at the back feels abandoned, while the person at the front feels trapped. The laundry junction sat roughly 120 yards beyond the boiler stairs, where the passage widened around a concrete support column. 3 routes met there. Straight ahead led beneath the old laundry, and eventually to the kitchen basement. Left climbed toward the prison hospital. Right ended at a maintenance cage and a disused freight shaft. I knew the map. I had never needed it in the dark with 11 frightened people and someone following us. "Straight through," I called. The water behind us roared louder as the broken sprinkler main emptied into the tunnel. It spread fast, ankle deep near the boiler stairs, and chasing us in a shallow brown sheet. The floor sloped toward the junction. The water came with us. Lena reached the split first and lifted her lantern toward the painted wall arrows. Kitchen ahead, hospital left, MAINT right. Someone had added a 4th arrow in fresh white chalk. CELLBLOCKD down. The arrow pointed at the floor. Evan saw it and stopped. "What the hell is that?" "Graffiti," Frank said. "There's no cell block D," Lena replied. "There used to be," Brooke asked. "No," her answer was immediate. That frightened the group more than hesitation would have. Warden's Gate had 3 public cell blocks, west, north, and the partially collapsed east block, which visitors viewed only from the yard. There had never been a D block. The prison's original plans used numbers, not letters, until renovations in the 1940s. "Keep moving," I said. The group began forward again. Something came down the hospital passage. Fast. A hard series of impacts, low to the ground, with a metallic dragging noise behind it. Marisol screamed. Frank stepped in front of her and raised his lantern like a weapon. Brooke pulled Evan against the wall. Lena reached for the heavy flashlight clipped to her belt. The sound accelerated. Scrape, bang, scrape, bang. A dark shape shot from the hospital corridor and struck the support column. Everyone recoiled. It was a mop bucket. An old yellow industrial bucket rolled onto its side, one caster spinning. A collapsed aluminum handle dragged behind it. Water continued dripping from an open line in the hospital passage. The runoff had pushed the bucket down the sloped floor. For a second, nobody moved. Then one of the unnamed visitors laughed. It was too loud and ended too quickly. Frank exhaled through his nose. Gravity again. Gravity is doing a lot of work tonight, Brooke said. She was trying to steady Evan, but her own hand shook. Behind us, the boiler access door struck the wall. A metal crash traveled down the tunnel. No one laughed after that. We took the kitchen route. The passage narrowed near the old laundry foundation. Pipes crowded the ceiling. The concrete changed from gray to a damp brown, and rusted brackets protruded from the walls where electrical lines had once been mounted. Our lantern beams caught mineral streaks and flaking paint. The first visitor to fall was a man named Caleb Ross, 41, male, an accountant from Cleveland, traveling with his partner. He had kept quiet through the tour and worn smooth-soled dress boots that belonged in a restaurant, not a wet tunnel. His right foot slid on the algae-dark concrete. He twisted as he fell. The sound from his ankle was small, a dry click. Then he shouted. Brooke was beside him immediately. "Don't move it. I'm fine," Caleb said through clenched teeth. "You're not." His partner crouched beside him, asking 3 questions at once. Brooke cut the boot laces with the folding trauma shears from her work pouch. Swelling had already begun around the outside of his ankle. "Can you wiggle your toes?" He did. "Any numbness?" "No, pain here." She touched above the ankle bone. Caleb flinched hard. "Could be a bad sprain, could be a fracture." "We can carry him," Frank said. "Not far," Brooke replied. "Not through stairs." Caleb tried to stand. His leg folded. Frank and I caught him under the arms. The group was tiring. I could hear it in their breathing and see it in the way lanterns dipped toward the floor. We had covered only a few hundred yards, but adrenaline burns through people quickly. Marisol's face had gone gray. Lena had a cut across one knuckle from the pipe burst. Evan's cracked camera hung against his chest, tapping his ribs each time he moved. The water reached the junction behind us. It advanced into the kitchen root in a thin, reflective sheet. We had to move. Frank took Caleb's left side. I took his right. His partner carried both lanterns. "Short steps," Brooke said. "Don't let the foot touch." Caleb nodded and immediately let the foot touch. He swore loudly. The kitchen basement door stood at the end of the passage beneath an exit sign with no power. Beyond it should have been the dry goods storage room, then a short corridor to the loading stairs, and an exterior steel door opening into the east delivery yard. That was our first escape attempt. I unlocked the basement door. It opened 3 inches, then stopped. Not barricaded this time, chained. A A chain had been looped through the handles on the kitchen side and cinched tight. I could see it through the gap. Bright zinc links. New hardware. Can you cut it? Brooke asked. With what? Frank pointed at the maintenance tools mounted inside the tunnel wall. Most were missing. One rusted pipe wrench remained on its hook. He pulled it free. Give me room. He forced the wrench head into the gap and tried to catch the chain. The opening was too narrow. He adjusted, braced one boot against the wall, and pulled. The wrench slipped. His hand struck the doorframe. Skin split across two knuckles. He barely reacted. Again, he said. Lena studied the hinges. They opened toward the kitchen. So we can't remove the hinge pins from here. Evan held his damaged camera near the gap. The chain looks padlocked. Can you see the lock? I asked. He angled the screen. A brass padlock hung at knee height. Frank looked at my key ring. Don't suppose you have that one? No, bolt cutters. In the maintenance cage. That was back at the junction, down the right-hand route. How far? Brooke asked. 40 yards. Frank handed me the wrench. Then we get them. No, Lena said. Someone came through this side to chain the door. They may still be in the kitchen, which is why we need to get out before they circle around. We don't know that the exterior door is open. We don't know anything, he snapped. Marisol touched his arm. He jerked away before realizing it was her. That hurt her more than he intended. I saw it. His face changed, but there was no time to repair it. The radio crackled from somewhere behind us. My radio, the one dragged beneath the boiler door. Howard's voice came through it. Daniel, answer. The transmission sounded distant, carried by the tunnel. Everyone turned toward the dark passage. Howard, I shouted. The radio clicked. Daniel, police are at the south gate. Relief moved through the group. Then Howard said, stay where you are. Frank frowned. I did too. Howard knew we were evacuating because of a possible fire and a pipe rupture. He would not tell us to stay in a flooding tunnel. Howard, I called. What phrase do you use to end every transmission? Silence. Lena looked at me. The radio clicked again. Daniel, stay where you are. The voice was Howard's. Almost. The rhythm was wrong. The words had been clipped from separate transmissions and played back in sequence. Evan understood first. Recording. A low chuckle came through the speaker. Not Howard. Then the radio went dead. One of the visitors began crying. Quietly at first, then with the embarrassed, breathless rhythm of someone trying not to make things worse. Brooke put a hand on her shoulder. Frank looked down the passage. They're behind us. Or using the radio from somewhere else, Lena said. The signal was close. Concrete reflects radio. People reflect bullets too. Doesn't mean I stand in front of one. We have no evidence of a gun. We have an injured man, a barricaded door, chained exits, and someone controlling the building. Stop, I said. My voice carried farther than I expected. Both of them looked at me. We retrieved the bolt cutters, I said. We cut the chain. Nobody goes alone. Who stays with Caleb? Brooke asked. You, Marisol, his partner, and 2 others. Marisol looked toward the dark tunnel. No, Frank lowered his voice. Mari, no, I'm not splitting up. The cutters are 40 yards away. That is splitting up. Her panic had changed shape. She was no longer shrinking inward. She was angry now, and anger let her speak clearly. We stay together, she said. Every stupid thing in places like this starts when people decide a hallway is short enough to be safe. Nobody challenged her, so all of us returned to the junction at Caleb's pace. It took too long. The water was calf deep in the lowest section now. Each step sent cold water into our shoes. Caleb made a strained sound whenever Frank and I shifted his weight. My shoulders burned. Sweat ran under my coat despite the cold. The chalk arrow remained on the support column. CELLBLOCKD down. The mop bucket had moved. It now sat upright near the hospital passage. Lena stopped. That was on its side. Frank aimed his lantern at the floor. A handprint marked the wet concrete beside it. Large, fresh. Someone had steadied themselves there. The maintenance route extended 40 yards to a locked mesh cage built against the wall. Behind it hung tools, extension cords, a portable pump, and red-handled bolt cutters. The cage door was open. The bolt cutters were gone. That was our second failed attempt. On the floor lay a short length of the same bright chain used on the kitchen door. One link had been cut cleanly. They took them, Evan said. Frank picked up the chain. Recently. How can you tell? Brooke asked. He showed her the cut edge. Shiny metal. No oxidation. Lena pointed toward the maintenance corridor. There's another access hatch at the end. To where? Marisol asked. The old freight shaft. Does it reach outside? No, it reaches all 3 service levels. Someone could move vertically through the prison while we remained trapped in the tunnels. The radio clicked again. This time the voice was not Howard's. 11, still moving. A man spoke softly, close to the microphone. Count again. Frank started down the maintenance route. I grabbed his sleeve. Don't. He's right there. He wants you to follow. That doesn't mean I don't. Marisol said, Frank. He stopped. For several seconds, he looked less like a retired officer and more like a man trying to decide which version of himself had survived retirement, the one who protected people, or the one who needed a threat in front of him to feel useful. He dropped the chain. We need another route, Brooke said. I looked at the wall arrows. Kitchen was blocked. Records was flooding and led back toward the intruder. Maintenance gave access to the freight shaft, which could be an ambush. Hospital led upward. The hospital stairs connect to North Block, I said. Lena shook her head immediately. North Block is closed. Only the public entrance. The staff landing should open. Should. The lock was replaced last spring. And beyond North Block, the exercise yard. Exterior gate. Padlocked from inside the gatehouse system. Which is compromised, Frank said. There's also a crash bar on the ambulance entrance. Lena thought through the map. Hospital passage to stairwell. Up 1 level to infirmary. Through treatment across the connecting bridge into North Block ground tier. Then east to the ambulance sally port. Yes. How far? 300 yards. 2 staircases. Everyone looked at Caleb. Brooke examined his ankle again. We need a splint. The maintenance cage contained scraps of wood, but no cutters. We used a narrow shelving brace, padded with Frank's scarf, and secured it with belts. Caleb bit down on the collar of his coat, while Brooke tightened the splint. He did not scream. That somehow made it harder to watch. We arranged a rotating carry. Frank and I took the first shift. 2 other visitors followed behind to relieve us. The hospital passage rose gradually. Water did not follow beyond the first 20 feet. The air smelled different there, dry plaster, mouse droppings, and old disinfectant released from the walls whenever humidity changed. We passed treatment rooms with wired glass windows. Rusted bed frames stood inside. Cabinet doors hung open. At the end of the corridor, a green emergency light glowed above the stairwell. Real power. The sight of it gave everyone a small amount of hope. I opened the stair door. The stairs climbed in 2 short flights around a central landing. Pale tile covered the walls. A steel handrail ran along both sides. We carried Caleb upward. Halfway to the landing, the building's main alarm finally activated. Sirens erupted above and below us. White strobes flashed. Marisol stumbled. Frank caught her one-handed while still supporting Caleb. "Keep moving," Lena shouted. The alarms made speech almost useless. At the landing, smoke drifted beneath the upper door. Thin, gray, real. Brooke saw it. "We can't go through." "It may be dust," Frank shouted. The smell reached us a second later. Burned plastic, not dust. We lowered Caleb onto the landing. The group compressed around him. Behind us, at the bottom of the stairs, the hospital passage door slammed shut. The magnetic holder had released when the alarm activated. I ran down and pushed the bar. The door opened 2 inches, then hit resistance. Water pressure. The flooded tunnel had reached the hospital branch and was pushing against the door from the other side. "Can we go back?" Lena called. "Not safely." The smoke thickened above. Our retreat was closing below. Brooke pulled her shirt over her nose. "We need another exit from this stairwell." "There's a basement landing," I said. Frank stared at me. "Below the tunnel, sub-basement." "What's down there?" "Old segregation intake." Lena's face tightened. "That section isn't stabilized." The sirens continued. Smoke gathered along the ceiling, spreading downward in slow layers. The bottom door groaned under water pressure. Then a voice came through the alarm speaker overhead. Not an automated announcement. The same man from the radio. "Tour group," he said. "North block is closed." A pause. "Use the lower level." Frank looked up at the speaker. "He's hurting us." The upper stairwell door jerked inward as heat changed the pressure beyond it. Smoke rolled through the gap. The lower door bent another inch under the flood. The only remaining route was down. I looked at Lena. She knew what was beneath us. So did I. The sub-basement had been sealed from tour after a partial ceiling collapse, exposed a section absent from the museum's modern floor plans. A section where the original prison records listed storage rooms, not cells. I took the master keys from my belt. "Get Caleb up," I said. "We're going down." We descended below the service tunnels, and the water forced the hospital door fully shut behind us. The sub-basement stairs ended at a steel gate, not a door. A gate made from vertical bars, thick enough to resist bolt cutters, with a mechanical lock set into the frame and a mesh panel welded across the lower half. The Preservation Trust had installed it after the ceiling collapse, mostly to keep curious volunteers from wandering into an area the engineers had not cleared. A sign hung from the bars. "No entry, structural hazard." Someone had turned it around. On the back, written in the same white chalk as the arrow upstairs, were 3 words: Count SDRTS, here nobody said anything. The alarm above us continued in bursts, dulled by the stairwell walls. Smoke had followed us down, but thinned near the lower landing, collecting in a gray layer along the ceiling. I tried the first key. Wrong. The second entered but would not turn. The master ring held 27 keys, and my hands had begun shaking again. "Daniel," Lena said, "look at the stamps." She was right. The keys were stamped by section. North, west, admin, below. I found the one marked below and turned it. The gate opened. A smell came through that did not belong in an abandoned prison wing. Coffee, stale cigarette smoke, human sweat. The corridor beyond was supposed to contain 3 storage rooms and a utility chase. That was what the museum's modern plans showed. Instead, the passage stretched farther than my lantern could reach. Doors lined both sides. Cell doors, narrow steel fronts with barred windows, each set into patched brickwork beneath a low concrete ceiling. 6 on the left, 6 on the right, 12 extra cells. Evan whispered, "No way." Lena moved her lantern over the nearest wall. These were hidden behind later construction. Frank stepped through the gate and examined the first door. Not original. "What?" I asked. "The frames might be, doors aren't." He touched the lock housing. "These have been rehung. New pins, new grease." Brooks stared through the bars. A mattress lay on the floor inside. Not a museum reproduction. A real foam camping pad. Plastic water bottles. Protein bar wrappers. A 5-gallon bucket with a lid. Someone had been using the cell. Someone had been living there or keeping another person there. The chalk numbers began at 85. The west cell block officially ended at 84. That was the visual trick Frank had noticed from the public tier, the shadow beyond cell 42. An architectural line continuing where the museum said it stopped. Not another doorway in the cell block itself, but a blocked service connection aligned behind the fire hose cabinet. The prison did have extra cells. They were simply underground. "Police need to see this," Evan said. "They will," Lena replied. His cracked camera was still recording. The lens had fractured, but the screen showed a smeared, usable image. That camera mattered now. The speaker above us clicked. "Daniel." The intruder's voice sounded almost conversational. "You finally counted correctly." Frank looked for the speaker grill and spotted it in the ceiling. "Show yourself," he said. The man laughed softly. "You always said that to inmates, Frank." Frank went still. Marisol looked at him. "How does he know your name?" He heard the tour. "Or researched the booking," Lena said. The voice continued. "Corrections officer, EMT, museum supervisor, streamer, German historian." Evan raised the camera. He knew who was coming. "No," I said, "the booking list." The midnight tour roster was printed in the gatehouse and stored in the office computer. Anyone with access to the control room could have seen it. That made the operation planned, not necessarily for us, but prepared for whoever arrived. A door slammed behind us. The barred gate had swung shut. Lena pulled it, locked. Frank grabbed the bars and shook them once. "Magnetic, mechanical," I said. Then someone turned a key. The stairwell beyond the gate was empty. Someone had been waiting above or concealed beside the landing. The The corridor speaker clicked again. "You have one injured man," the voice said, "and one woman who can't breathe." Marisol pressed herself against the wall. Frank stepped toward the speaker. "You touch her. I don't need to." The lights came on. Not museum lights, work lamps. Bare LED strips had been mounted along the ceiling and connected by orange extension cords. The sudden brightness exposed the entire corridor. 12 cells, a table at the far end, 2 laptops, radio equipment, camera monitors, boxes of old prison records, and 3 people. The injured man from the boiler door sat tied to a chair beside the equipment table. Blood had dried down the left side of his face. I recognized him now. Howard, the gatehouse officer. His uniform shirt was torn at the shoulder. Tape covered his mouth. Behind him stood a man in a dark hoodie holding the missing bolt cutters. He was younger than I expected. Mid-30s lean, with a close beard and clear safety glasses. No mask. No attempt to hide his face. That was worse. Beside him stood a broader man in gray coveralls, maybe 50, with the museum's maintenance logo stitched over the chest. I knew him. Rusk, Lena said. Peter Rusk, 51, male, had worked contract maintenance at Warden's Gate for 6 years. He knew the alarm panel, the locks, the dead camera zones, and every repair the museum postponed. He had been dismissed 2 months earlier after antique hardware disappeared from the East Block restoration area. He looked exhausted rather than triumphant. "Daniel," he said, "this got out of hand." The man with the bolt cutters smiled. "No, it didn't." Rusk flinched. That told me who was in charge. The younger man dragged the bolt cutters across the concrete as he walked toward us. Metal scraped. The same sound we had heard behind the boiler door. "My name is Silas Vane," he said, "since introductions matter on tour." Silas Vane, 37, male, spoke with the flat confidence of someone who had repeated his plan enough times that reality had become an inconvenience. His hands were clean. His boots were wet to the ankle. A radio was clipped beneath his coat mine. Evan angled the camera at him. Silas noticed. "Give me that." "No," Brooke turned on Evan. "Give it to him." Evan looked betrayed. "Now," she said. He removed the camera and held it out. Silas approached. At the last second, Evan threw it sideways through the bars of cell 87. The camera landed on the mattress, still recording. Silas struck him across the face with the bolt cutter handle. Evan went down. Brooke lunged. Frank caught her around the waist before Silas could swing again. Evan lay on one elbow, blood spilling from his nose. His eyes were open. No plot armor, no heroic recovery. He was conscious, but stunned. Brooke dropped beside him. "You may have broken it," she said. Evan touched his nose and cried out, "Don't touch it." Silas pointed the cutters toward the open cells. Everyone inside, 3 per cell. "Why?" I asked. "Because police are entering the property. You said the cameras were looping." "They are," but Howard called before Peter reached him. Rusk looked at the floor. Howard had bought us time. Silas continued. "Police search the public blocks first. Fire crews deal with the alarm. By the time they reach this level, Peter and I leave through the freight shaft." "And us?" Lena asked. Silas shrugged. "You're found." Frank stared at the extension cords, the laptops, the boxes. "You're stealing records." "Selling records," Silas corrected. Intake ledgers, photographs, death register pages. Collectors pay more when provenance is clean. The hidden cells were storage and processing space for stolen artifacts. The false haunting details, the count, the voice recordings, the moving doors were intimidation. A way to scare staff away from the areas they were using. The midnight tour had intersected with a removal night. The blue writing in the ledger had been planted. The extra figure on the camera had been Rusk crossing behind the group through the concealed alignment near the west block. The door sounds had been remotely triggered using lines and weighted closers. Everything had an explanation. None of it made the corridor safer. Silas stepped closer to Marisol. Frank moved between them. "Back up," Silas said. Frank did not. Silas struck him in the ribs with the closed cutters. The sound was thick. Frank folded, one hand catching the wall. Marisol screamed his name. He remained standing for 2 seconds, then dropped to one knee. Possible fracture, possibly worse. Silas lifted the cutters again. Rusk said, "Enough." Silas turned. Rusk's face had changed. Fear remained, but it was no longer fear of police. "You said nobody gets hurt," he said. Silas looked at Howard, tied and bleeding. That ended early. Rusk took one step backward toward the equipment table. I saw where his hand was going. A red lever mounted on the wall, fire suppression. The subbasement had an independent deluge valve because ordinary sprinkler heads would not protect the concealed corridor if storage materials caught fire. Rusk looked at me, only for a second. Then he pulled it. Water erupted from open nozzles along the ceiling, not a mist, a heavy, cold downpour. The lights flickered. Silas shouted and turned toward Rusk. That was the opening. Lena grabbed the nearest cell door and slammed it into Silas's arm. The bolt cutters fell. Frank, still on one knee, kicked them toward me. I caught one handle and dragged them close. Silas drove his shoulder into the door, knocking Lena backward into the bars. Her head struck steel. She collapsed, dazed. Brooke threw herself over Evan. Rusk ran for the freight shaft door behind the equipment table. Silas caught his coat and dragged him backward. They hit the monitors. One screen toppled and burst against the floor. Sparks snapped under the falling water. The LED strips went dark. Emergency lamps came on, weak and red. Everything became movement and impact. I opened the bolt cutters and drove the jaws into the cable securing Howard to the chair. "Too thick." "Key," Howard tried to shout through the tape. I pulled the tape from his mouth. His skin came with it. "Rusk's belt," he gasped. "Handcuff key." They had used police-style cuffs, not cable. Behind us, Marisol helped Frank upright. He could not fully straighten and held his left side. Silas struck Rusk twice. Rusk stopped resisting. Silas dragged him towards cell 96 and threw him inside. Then he turned toward us. The red light sharpened his face. Last chance. He pulled a folding knife from his coat. Not a huge blade, 4 inches, practical and real. That made it more frightening. Frank moved forward. He was injured, wet, and probably had broken ribs, but corrections training had shaped his reflexes for decades. "Don't," Marisol said. He did anyway. Silas slashed. Frank caught his wrist with both hands, but the blade cut through his coat and opened his forearm. Blood appeared immediately, dark under the red lamps. They crashed into cell 89. Frank drove Silas into the bunk frame. Silas brought his knee up into Frank's damaged ribs. Frank made a sound I never heard from him before or after. He lost his grip. I had the bolt cutters, too heavy to swing safely in the narrow corridor, too slow, so I used them as a barrier. I drove the handles between Silas and Frank, caught Silas's knife wrist inside the open jaws, and squeezed. Not enough to cut, enough to crush fingers. Silas screamed and dropped the knife. He struck me with his free hand. My head snapped sideways. The corridor tilted. He hit me again. Panic tried to take over. My chest locked. My vision narrowed to the wet floor and the knife lying 6 feet away. 6 feet, 4 screws on the lantern battery cover, 5 things: red lamp, steel bars, water, Silas's black boot, the white chalk number 89. I stayed upright. Lena rose behind him, blood running from her hairline, and looped an orange extension cord around his neck. She did not choke him. She pulled backward to unbalance him. Silas reached for the cord. Frank drove his shoulder into Silas's knees. They went down together. Brooke kicked the knife beneath a cell door. Marisol picked up the bolt cutters. For one absurd second, she held them like they weighed nothing. Then she dropped the jaws over Silas's ankle, not cutting, trapping his boot against the floor. "Stop moving," she said. Her voice was steady. Silas kicked. The heavy cutters twisted his ankle. A crack sounded. He howled and stopped. Rusk crawled out of cell 96. Silas had not locked it. "Cuffs," Howard shouted. Rusk removed the small key from his belt and fumbled twice before opening Howard's restraints. Howard stood and nearly fell. He had a deep scalp wound, one eye swollen, and both hands numb from the cuffs. Still, he moved to Silas. Together, Howard and Frank rolled him face down. Howard cuffed one wrist. Silas fought again. Rusk sat on his legs while Howard secured the second wrist. It ended without a cinematic final blow. No one killed anyone. Silas lay in water beneath the red emergency lights, coughing and swearing, one ankle deformed inside his boot. For several seconds, we simply breathed. Then a cracking noise came from the ceiling. Lena looked up. The water from the deluge had soaked the already unstable plaster and concrete around the old collapse zone. A fracture spread across the ceiling above cells 93 through 96. Dust fell. "Move," she shouted. We dragged Silas by the cuffs. Frank could barely help. His left arm hung close to his body. Blood ran from his right forearm. Caleb remained near the gate, half conscious with pain. Brooke and Evan pulled Howard. Rusk limped behind us. The ceiling over cell 95 collapsed. Concrete and brick slammed into the corridor. The impact threw grit and dirty water across our backs. Cell 96 disappeared behind debris. The fracture continued toward the gate. I reached it first. Locked. The key was on the other side of the bars where I had dropped it after opening the gate. Visible, 6 inches beyond reach. The bolt cutters would not cut the bars. Frank looked at the mechanical housing. Latch plate. What? Cut the latch plate. The metal was thinner than the bars, but still hardened. I opened the bolt cutters and position the jaws around the exposed edge. Too narrow. Lena forced a broken piece of monitor casing between the gate and frame, widening the gap. Again, I squeezed. Nothing. Frank placed one hand over mine. His face had gone pale. Together, we pulled. The plate bent. The ceiling cracked again. Marisol and Brooke joined us, 4 people on the handles. The plate tore away. The gate opened. We moved into the stairwell as the corridor failed behind us. A slab struck Rusk across the lower leg. He went down under the gate. He screamed. The collapsing ceiling filled the doorway with dust and noise. Silas tried to crawl away despite the cuffs. Rusk's leg was trapped beneath a block of concrete. "We can't lift that," Lena said. Rusk knew it too. His face went slack. "Leave me." Nobody moved. "Leave me." Frank lowered himself beside the slab, but one look ended the idea. Several 100 pounds, possibly more, and the surrounding ceiling still moving. Rusk shoved the freight shaft access key at me. "East shaft," he said. "Bottom landing opens to yard culvert. That route isn't on the plans." "I know." The crack above him widened. Howard grabbed my coat. "We go now." Rusk looked at Lena. "I'm sorry." Then the ceiling came down between us. The gate slammed inward under the impact, and the stairwell filled with dust so thick that every lantern became a pale blur. We climbed. There was no return to the sub-basement. The fire crews reached us 18 minutes later through the North Block ambulance entrance after Howard used the maintenance radio in the stairwell to guide them. Silas survived. Frank survived. Lena survived. Rusk did not come out. Neither did the 12 hidden cells. They were buried beneath part of the prison that the public records insisted had never existed. The first firefighter who reached us asked how many people were in the group. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Nothing about it was funny. The question simply landed on the last intact part of me and broke it. Firefighter was a broad woman in a soot-marked helmet, standing in the North Block ambulance entrance with an oxygen cylinder on her back. Behind her, white emergency lights turned the prison yard into a flat, colorless space. Rain had started while we were underground. It struck the metal roof over the sally port in rapid little bursts. "How many?" she asked again. 11 visitors, I said. 3 staff, 2 suspects. Howard corrected me from the stretcher beside the wall. 4 staff. I looked at him. "Rusk," he said. His injured eye was nearly closed. Blood had dried in the lines beside his nose. "Rusk is still down there." The firefighter wrote something on the taped card attached to her sleeve. "How many came out?" I counted. I had to touch each person as I did it. Lena sat against the wall with gauze pressed to her scalp. Frank lay on a backboard, furious at being told not to move. Marisol knelt beside him, one hand on his shoulder. Brooke was holding Evan's face steady while a paramedic checked his pupils. Caleb had already been loaded into an ambulance. His partner had gone with him. The other visitors stood beneath emergency blankets, wet shoes leaving brown marks on the concrete. Howard, Silas, face down and handcuffed, with 2 police officers beside him, me. 15 out, I said. 1 trapped. The firefighter looked toward the dark ambulance corridor. "We have a collapse team coming. I wanted to tell her that Rusk had been alive less than 20 minutes earlier. I wanted to describe the exact location beneath the hospital stairs, the gate, the buried corridor, the cells numbered 85 through 96. Instead, I threw up beside the stretcher, mostly water. My stomach had emptied itself somewhere between the hidden corridor and the north block. A paramedic guided me onto a folding chair and placed an oxygen mask over my face. I tried to tell him I did not need it. He asked whether I had been exposed to smoke. Yes, then you need it. I have to help with the layout. You can do that sitting down. He shone a light into my eyes. The right side of my face had begun to swell where Silas hit me. My jaw clicked when I opened my mouth. The paramedic asked if I had lost consciousness. I don't think so. That's not a no, Lena answered for me. He stayed upright. She had walked over without my noticing. A strip of white dressing crossed her hairline. Her coat was gone, replaced by a foil blanket that crackled whenever she moved. The paramedic looked at her. You should be lying down. So should everyone. That doesn't make it optional. She sat on the concrete beside my chair. For a while, neither of us spoke. Firefighters moved through the ambulance entrance, carrying hoses, saws, lights, and timber braces. Police vehicles filled the east yard. Red and blue reflections moved across the wet stone walls. Somewhere beyond North Block, an engine idled with the heavy diesel vibration that you could feel through the floor. The prison looked less frightening under emergency lighting. That surprised me. It looked damaged, poorly funded, improvised. A collection of aging systems maintained by people who knew exactly which doors required a shoulder and which alarms needed the panel reset twice. Human failures are often uglier than mysteries, but they are easier to stand near. Lena nudged my boot with hers. You counted correctly, she said. I looked at her. At the end, that isn't comforting. It was not meant to be. A police detective interviewed us in the museum cafe at 3 in the morning. The cafe normally sold coffee, pretzels, and slices of pie under photographs of former wardens. That night, half the chairs had been moved into a treatment area. Mud covered the tile. A firefighter had left an axe against the pastry display. Detective Nora Bell, 46, female, worked for the County Major Crimes Unit. She had damp hair tucked behind one ear, and the controlled patience of someone who knew frightened witnesses became less accurate when rushed. She interviewed us separately. I gave my account twice. The first time was chronological. The second time was physical. Where had each door been? Which direction did it open? How high was the water? Which key had I used? Where exactly was Silas standing when Rusk pulled the deluge lever? Could I distinguish the original hidden cell masonry from later repairs? I drew maps on the backs of catering invoices. The official prison plans ended above the subbasement. Rusk's handwritten maintenance diagrams did not. Police found them in his truck, parked behind a closed machine shop 4 miles from the prison. The truck also contained empty archival boxes, rolls of plastic wrap, 2 battery-powered work lights, and a printed copy of that night's tour roster. That answered one question. They had known who was coming. Not because we were selected personally. Detective Bell explained later, because Rusk monitored the booking system through credentials that should have been deactivated when his contract ended. He and Silas chose tour nights carefully. A midnight group gave them cover for lights, footsteps, and occasional movement inside the property. They expected to remain below the public route. When the interior camera briefly caught Rusk behind our group, Silas began improvising. The false count was meant to make us doubt ourselves. The black ledger had been removed from archival storage weeks earlier and planted in the records room that afternoon. The blue ink message was written by Silas before the tour. Hidden magnetic catch beneath the cabinet shelf let him open the book remotely when the intake wing power circuit changed. The voice over the radio was assembled from staff transmissions stored on the museum's digital logging system. The cell doors in West Block had not closed by themselves. Thin black lines, nearly invisible from the floor, had been threaded through the upper tier latches and routed into a maintenance chase. Police found the spools later. The flashlight face behind the boiler door had been Howard. The hand that pulled him back belonged to Rusk. That part was harder to hear. Rusk had attacked Howard in the gatehouse under Silas's direction, but Howard fought back and split his scalp against the corner of a console. Rusk could have left him unconscious. Instead, he pressed a towel to the wound and argued with Silas about calling an ambulance. Silas responded by striking Howard with a radio and taking control himself. Rusk was guilty. He was also frightened. Those facts did not cancel each other. The collapse team reached the hidden corridor shortly after dawn. They did not recover Rusk alive. They found him beneath part of the ceiling near cell 96. His lower leg was crushed, but the medical examiner determined that the fatal injury came from the second collapse, not the first. He likely died within minutes. I had imagined him alive longer. That was worse than the truth. For 3 nights after, I heard him shouting whenever I closed my eyes. Leave me, then the ceiling, then nothing. Frank spent 4 days in the hospital. He had 3 fractured ribs, a partial lung collapse, a deep laceration across his forearm, and a dislocated finger he had not mentioned until a nurse tried to remove his wedding ring. Marisol stayed with him, though she refused the private room offered by the hospital and slept upright in a chair near the doorway. She could not tolerate the door being closed. When I visited, Frank looked smaller in the bed. Not weak, reduced. Pain had taken away the posture he used to hold the world at a distance. I was wrong about the stair door, he said. It was the first thing he told me. You were right about Silas. No, he adjusted the oxygen line beneath his nose. I treated every choice like somebody had to win it. Marisol looked at him over the top of her book. He noticed. I'm working on it, he said. She turned a page. That was apparently enough. Brooke had a fractured finger from the struggle and bruising across her shoulder. Evan's nose was broken in 2 places. He also had a mild concussion and 6 stitches inside his upper lip. His camera survived. The memory card did too. The footage became central evidence because the hidden corridor cameras were destroyed in the collapse, and the control room system had overwritten portions of the night with loops. Evan did not post the video. At first, I assumed the police had ordered him not to. They had had requested that all witnesses preserve recordings and avoid public statements, but there was no permanent legal barrier. He simply chose not to. A month later, he sent me a private link. The footage was 27 minutes long, ending when the water damaged the camera. Most of it was blurred or angled toward a mattress, but the audio captured Sila's identifying himself, the theft operation, Rusk's argument, and the beginning of the fight. At the end, after Lena pulled the extension cord and Frank tackled Sila's, the camera shifted. For 3 seconds, the cracked lens pointed through the bars of cell 87 toward the corridor. Everyone visible was moving. Sila's, Frank, Lena, Brooke, me. Behind us, near cell 92, a tall figure in a dark hoodie crossed the frame. Evan had circled it. I watched the clip 12 times. The figure was not Rusk. Rusk was visible near the equipment table at the same moment. It was not Howard. He was still tied to the chair. It was too tall to be Marisol, too broad to be one of the visitors, and it moved away from the gate toward the collapsed end of the corridor. Detective Bell viewed the same footage. Her explanation was reasonable. Video compression, water on the lens, a doubled image caused by the cracked glass and the flickering red lamps. She showed me how Frank's shape could have reflected against the wet cell door and appeared farther down the corridor. I believed her. Mostly. Sila's vein was charged with kidnapping, aggravated assault, criminal conspiracy, burglary, arson-related offenses, theft of historical property, unlawful restraint, and several counts connected to disabling emergency systems. Prosecutors later added attempted homicide charges based on the deliberate flooding, and the fire set in the administration electrical room. He accepted a plea agreement before trial. Rusk's death complicated the case, but it did not erase the evidence in his truck, his computer records, or the stolen artifacts recovered from a rented storage unit outside Youngstown. The buyers were real. So was the market. Prison photographs, execution documents, signed disciplinary records, and personal letters had been sold to private collectors through intermediaries. Some pieces were recovered. Others had disappeared into collections whose owners claimed they purchased everything legally. Howard retired. He insisted the decision had already been made before that night, though nobody believed him. At his retirement lunch, he gave me the radio Sila's had taken. The casing was cracked. The battery no longer held a charge. "I don't want it," I said. "Neither do I, so throw it away." "You throw it away." It sat in my kitchen drawer for 6 months. Then I took it to an electronics recycling center 3 counties away, because putting it in my own trash felt too intimate. Caleb needed surgery for a fractured fibula and torn ligaments. He recovered well enough to walk without a cane, though he sued the Preservation Trust and settled for an amount nobody discussed publicly. The other visitors gave statements, attended therapy, or tried not to talk about it. One couple divorced the following year. I do not know whether the prison had anything to do with it. Lena finished her degree. Her final thesis examined how museums use controlled fear as entertainment and how safety systems fail when atmosphere becomes part of the product. She cited Warden's Gate without naming individual victims. She never returned to night work. Neither did I for a while. I believed that meant I had failed. Then my therapist asked why I thought survival required returning to the exact place that injured me. I did not have a good answer. Warden's gate closed for 14 months. Engineers stabilized the hospital wing, drained the tunnels, replaced the fire system, and sealed the hidden segregation corridor behind reinforced concrete. The Preservation Trust's board resigned. A new director took over. The midnight tour were permanently canceled. The prison reopened on a Thursday in early spring. I attended the staff preview. The lobby smelled of fresh paint and coffee. New exit signs glowed above every public doorway. Digital counters tracked visitors entering and leaving each block. Radios were encrypted. Cameras covered every stairwell and service corridor. The west cell block looked almost ordinary. School groups would come through again. Retired officers would correct guides. Teenagers would photograph themselves behind bars. The gift shop would sell striped socks and reproduction inmate cards. Frank and Marisol came to the reopening too. He walked carefully and no longer entered cells. Marisol stayed in the center of the corridors instead of near the walls. Evan did not attend. Brooke sent flowers. Lena stood beside me beneath the rotunda and looked up at the restored catwalk lights. 84, she said. I followed her gaze. The official tour script now included a brief statement about the concealed sub-basement cells. The museum acknowledged their existence, the theft operation, and the reason the area could never be opened to the public. No legends, no ghosts, no embellished deaths, just facts. 84 public cells, I said, and 12 sealed. The new visitor count display near the entrance changed as a maintenance worker stepped outside. Occupancy: 7. There were 7 of us in the block. I counted the director, 2 engineers, Frank, Marisol, Lena, me. 7. The display flickered. Occupancy: 8, then returned to 7. The engineer nearest the panel tapped the casing. Calibration lag, he said, happens when someone pauses in the sensor field. Nobody had paused in the doorway. I looked toward the far end of the second tier, where the old fire hose cabinet had been removed and the recess behind it filled with new stone. The wall was clean, flat, permanent. A radio crackled somewhere below us. One burst of static, then nothing. Lena looked at me. I knew what she was asking. I counted again. 7. This time, I did not count a third. That's tonight's story. If it gives you chills, make sure to like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and tap the bell so you never miss what's coming next. And if you're still brave enough, there are more dark tales waiting for you right here on the channel. Go watch another, if you dare. Welcome to Mia Horror Stories. To make it easier on your eyes, this video plays against a black screen, so you can close your eyes, get comfortable, and let the story take over. But don't relax too much, the ending might just catch you off guard. Stay with me until the very last word. The first man I saw without a shadow was standing under 6 recessed ceiling lights and a brass chandelier. That sounds impossible until you know the floor. The chandelier was decorative, fitted with low-watt amber bulbs that made the Baccarat salon look warmer than it was. The recessed lights were angled toward the tables, not the guests. and the wall behind the man was covered in black acoustic fabric that swallowed reflections. He wore a charcoal suit. The carpet beneath him was patterned with dark red diamonds. There were plenty of ordinary reasons why I couldn't see his shadow. What bothered me was the woman beside him. Her shadow stretched cleanly across the carpet. His didn't. I was carrying a silver tray with 2 bottles of sparkling water, and I slowed just enough for the glasses to rattle against each other. "Keep moving," someone murmured behind me. That was how my first night in the private gaming rooms began, with a stranger who appeared to have no shadow, a supervisor telling me not to stare, and the sudden knowledge that I had already broken a rule nobody had bothered to explain. My name is Evan Mercer, 28, male, and at that point, I had been working at the Silver Crest Casino in Atlantic City for exactly 3 hours and 11 minutes. I knew the time because I kept checking it. The Silver Crest sat at the southern end of the boardwalk, between a shuttered souvenir arcade and a newer hotel, whose glass facade reflected the ocean in clean blue slabs. The building had been renovated in stages, which meant the public casino floor was all white stone, video walls, and electronic roulette, while the back corridors still looked like something from an office complex built in 1987. Beige paint, brown baseboards, fluorescent tubes that buzzed when the compressors kicked on. I had taken the job because my mother's assisted living payments had increased again, and the warehouse where I'd worked in Egg Harbor Township had cut night shifts after Christmas. Casino work paid better, especially with tips. More importantly, it came with health insurance after 90 days. 90 days had become the number I repeated when I needed to ignore something unpleasant. Bad customer. 90 days. Sore feet. 90 days. A man with no visible shadow. Keep walking. The person behind me was Marina Voss, 36, female, the night hospitality supervisor for the high-limit floor. She was tall, narrow-shouldered, and carried herself with the economical precision of someone who had spent years moving through crowded rooms without touching anybody. Her dark hair was tied into a knot, so tight it looked uncomfortable. She wore a black suit with a silver casino pin at the lapel and soft-soled shoes that made almost no sound. Marina passed me and took the tray from my hands without breaking stride. "You don't stop in a doorway," she said quietly. I wasn't. You stopped. For half a second. That still stopped. She entered the salon, delivered the bottles, and spoke to the guests with a pleasant expression that seemed disconnected from the rest of her face. The suited man didn't acknowledge her. The woman did. She gave Marina a small nod, then returned her attention to the cards. I waited in the corridor beside a narrow service console, trying to look useful. Through the open door, I could hear the soft click of ceramic chips and the dealer announcing numbers in a low voice. The room smelled faintly of citrus cleaner, expensive cologne, and the cold metallic air that leaked from overworked ventilation ducts. There were no slot machines in the private salons, no bells or digital fanfare. The quiet was deliberate. Even the carpet seemed designed to prevent noise from escaping. Marina came back with the empty tray. "What did you see?" she asked. The question was so direct that I almost laughed. What? She looked at me. I glanced toward the salon. Nothing. Good answer. I mean, I saw the guests. Your hospitality. You see drink orders, ashtrays, spills, and whether somebody is about to be sick. Everything else is outside your job description. She handed me the tray. Her tone wasn't threatening. That made it worse. Threats were emotional. Marina sounded like she was explaining where the clean linens were stored. I wasn't staring, I said. Everyone stares their first week. At what? The corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile. People who spend more in an evening than we earn in a year. Then she turned and walked toward the service elevator. I followed her. The private floor occupied part of the casino's 18th level, though the elevator panel called it 17. The hotel skipped 13, and one of the renovation plans had combined 2 floors, so nobody seemed entirely sure what level we were actually on. Guests reached the main salons through a mirrored lobby guarded by security. Staff used a network of back corridors, kitchens, storage rooms, and locked vestibules. Marina tapped her badge against the elevator reader. The doors opened with a dull hydraulic thump. Inside, she pressed B2. Where are we going? I asked. Receiving. I thought we were doing service rounds. We are. We need the imported mineral water from secure storage. There's secure water. There's secure everything. The elevator descended. I hated elevators. I didn't mention it during my interview because the position description had said food service, guest assistance, and occasional luggage handling. Nothing about spending half the shift traveling inside metal boxes with no visible hinges. My fear wasn't dramatic. I didn't scream or claw at the walls. It was more embarrassing than that. My throat tightened. My hands tingled. I became intensely aware of the distance between floors and the fact that every breath depended on machinery I couldn't inspect. When I was 12, my father and I had been trapped in a hospital elevator for 47 minutes after visiting my grandmother. He had handled it badly. He kicked the doors, shouted into the emergency speaker, and eventually began breathing so hard that I thought he was dying. Afterward, he made me promise not to tell my mother. I kept that promise until he died. The Silver Crest elevator gave a small shudder between floors. I shifted my weight. Marina noticed. Of course she did. You all right? Fine. You look gray. First night nerves. She watched me for another second, then pressed the door open button before we had arrived, as though testing whether it did anything. It didn't. Don't faint, she said. The paperwork is irritating. The doors opened onto a concrete corridor. Cold air rolled in. Somewhere beyond the walls, a refrigeration unit cycled with a deep mechanical growl. The basement smelled of wet cardboard, bleach, and fryer oil. It was nothing like the private floor, and the ordinary ugliness of it made me feel better. A security officer waited beside a pallet of boxed liquor. His name was Calvin Reese, 52 male, though everyone called him Cal. He was broad through the chest, with a graying mustache, and a face that always seemed a few minutes away from needing sleep. His uniform shirt pulled slightly around the buttons. A radio was clipped to his shoulder, turned low enough that the dispatcher's voice came through as a soft, electric murmur. You training the new kid? Cal asked. He's 28, Marina said. New adult then. Cal looked at my name tag. Evan, you local. Summers Point. That counts. He scanned Marina's badge, then mine. The handheld reader beeped for her and gave a harsh double tone for me. Cal tried again. Same sound. Not cleared, he said. Marina frowned. He's assigned to 17. System says hospitality standard. He was added yesterday. System says what it says. Marina took out her phone, but there was no signal in the basement. She held it up anyway, as if height might help. Cal leaned closer to me. First night. Is it that obvious? You're wearing the issued shoes. I looked down. What's wrong with them? Nothing if you hate your feet. Marina slid her phone back into her pocket. We need the cases from cage 4. Cal's expression changed slightly. Not alarm, more like annoyance at finding an unexpected stain. Cage 4's restricted tonight. Since when? Since 6. By who? He lifted one shoulder. Operations. We have service scheduled. Then take it up with operations. Marina looked toward the reinforced door behind him. It had no window, only a card reader and a small dome camera mounted above the frame. What's in there? I asked. Neither of them answered. The refrigeration unit stopped. In the sudden gap, I could hear water ticking through a pipe overhead. Cal adjusted the radio on his shoulder. Take from regular storage, he said. Nobody upstairs can tell the difference once it's in a glass. They can, Marina said. They say they can. Last month, one of them identified the bottling date. Last month, one of them lost 80 grand in 40 minutes and accused a dealer of changing the gravity. Marina exhaled through her nose. That was the first moment she seemed like a normal employee rather than part of the building. Cal looked at me again. Here's useful advice, Evan. Rich guests are allowed to be eccentric. Staff are not. So whatever seems strange, make sure it's strange in a way management has approved. Marina gave him a flat look. You rehearsed that, had a long shift. A door opened farther down the corridor. 2 men in dark maintenance uniforms came through carrying a rolled section of black fabric between them. It was thick and stiff, almost like theater curtain material. The older worker saw us and immediately angled the roll away, though there was nowhere to hide it. The younger man had a strip of white tape stuck to his sleeve. Written on it in marker were the words, Room 18, North Wall. They moved past without speaking. One of the wheels on their cart squealed every few feet. Squeak, roll, squeak, roll. Marina watched them disappear around the corner. What happened in 18? She asked Cal. Renovation. It was renovated in October. Then they're renovating the renovation. During service, Cal's radio crackled. He turned his head to listen. The dispatcher said something about a loading dock gate and a delivery truck with the wrong authorization code. Cal pressed the transmit button and answered in clipped security shorthand. While he spoke, I looked at the dome camera above cage 4. A small red status light glowed inside the tinted cover. Then it blinked out. 3 seconds later, it came back. Cal stopped talking. He had seen it too. Camera reboot, Marina asked. Looks like. Do they do that automatically? Not usually. His radio crackled again. This time the voice was clearer. Unit 12, confirm status at B2 restricted access. Cal raised the radio. Unit 12, on location, door secure. A pause. Confirm no unauthorized staff present. Cal's eyes moved from Marina to me. Supervisor Voss and trainee Mercer, he said. Hospitality assignment. Another pause, longer than the first. Removed trainee from restricted corridor. The words came through with a burst of static. Cal lowered the radio. Marina folded her arms. He has to learn the route. Not tonight. Why? Because they just told me to remove him. Who's they? Cal looked toward the camera. He didn't answer. The ride back up felt slower. Marina stood beside the control panel with her arms crossed. I stared at the seam between the elevator doors and counted breaths. At 11, the car jolted. The overhead lights dimmed, brightened, then settled. Marina's hand moved toward the emergency panel, but the elevator continued rising. You really do hate these, she said. I don't love them. What happened? I could have lied. Instead, maybe because she had briefly looked worried downstairs, I told her about the hospital. Not all of it, just the 47 minutes and my father panicking. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, That's a long time. Yeah, my brother got stuck in one in Prague when we were kids. He peed in a shopping bag. I looked at her. She kept her face straight for almost 2 seconds. Then she smiled. It changed her completely. The elevator opened. Noise spilled in from the casino floor below the private salons. Distant slot machine jingles, laughter, a burst of applause from a craps table. The sounds were muted by walls and distance, but after the basement, they felt cheerful. Marina stepped out. Come on, she said. We'll use the regular water and remove the labels. You're serious. Completely. We reached the service pantry, where stacks of glasses sat beneath blue sterilizing lights. Marina showed me how to polish the rims without leaving lint, how to arrange bottles so the labels faced away from the guests, and which players required room temperature water because cold drinks supposedly interfered with concentration. For 20 minutes, the night became ordinary. I liked the work more than I expected. There was a rhythm to it. Restock, wipe, check orders. Listen for the soft chime from the salon call panels. It reminded me of warehouse shifts, except everything was quieter and every item cost 10 times as much. Then the service phone rang. Marina answered. Hospitality, she listened. Her eyes moved toward me. Yes, she said, he's here. Another pause. No, his access wasn't active. She looked through the pantry doorway toward the corridor. I understand. She hung up. What? I asked. Room 18 needs a delivery. The room they're renovating. Apparently it's finished. That was fast. She didn't respond. On the counter beside the phone was a small black envelope that hadn't been there before. I was sure of that. The envelope had my name written across it in silver ink. EVAN Mercer. I looked at Marina. Did you put that there? No. You saw someone come in? No. The pantry had one entrance. We had both been standing inside it. Marina picked up the envelope, turned it over, then handed it to me. It wasn't sealed. Inside was a white access card with no casino logo, no photograph, and no printed name. Just a magnetic strip and the number 18 embossed into the plastic. There was also a folded note. Marina read it over my shoulder. 1 bottle, 1 glass, trainee only. Enter when the light above the door turns blue. Below that, in smaller handwriting, do not use the main corridor. The call panel chimed. Once, the screen displayed a room number. Marina looked at the blank access card, then at me. "You don't have to do this," she said. It was the first time all night she had offered me a choice. I thought about the insurance waiting at the end of 90 days. I thought about my mother's invoices stacked on my kitchen table. I thought about Cal being ordered to remove me from the basement and the camera going dark for 3 seconds. Then, from somewhere beyond the pantry wall, came the faint squeal of a cartwheel. Squeak, roll, squeak, roll. Marina placed a bottle of water and an empty glass on my tray. "Service stairs are at the end of the west hall," she said. "They lead to a side entrance. You've been inside room 18. She adjusted the glass until it sat exactly in the center of the tray. "No. Do you know who's in there?" Her eyes stayed on the glass. "No," the call panel chimed again. This time, the small indicator beside room 18 turned blue. Marina opened the pantry door and looked into the corridor. "Your decision," she said. At the far end of the hall, past the darkened salons and the framed mirrors designed to make the corridor look wider, a blue light glowed above a door I hadn't noticed before. There was no room number on it. And beneath that blue light, the carpet looked perfectly flat. No shadow from the handle, no shadow from the frame, nothing at all. I made it 3 steps into the west hall before Marina called my name. Not loudly. She said it the way people speak when they don't want a microphone to catch them. "Evan," I stopped. The tray balanced against my left palm, one glass centered on a folded white napkin, one bottle standing beside it with the label turned inward. The unmarked door waited at the far end of the corridor beneath its blue light. Up close, the hall was darker than the service pantry, lit by narrow fixtures near the floor that gave the carpet a wet sheen. Marina stood in the pantry doorway. "Come back. You just told me it was my decision." "It was. I've changed my mind." The service phone rang behind her. She flinched at the sound, which did more to frighten me than anything else had that night. Marina stepped backward and answered it without taking her eyes off me. "Hospitality." The voice on the other end was loud enough for me to hear its rhythm, but not the words. Low, male, calm. Marina listened. "No," she said. "He hasn't entered." A pause. "The trainee isn't cleared." Another pause. Her jaw tightened. "That isn't standard procedure." The voice continued. Marina glanced toward the ceiling camera mounted above the pantry door. Its red indicator was on. "We need authorization from surveillance and security," she said. The person hung up. Marina held the receiver for another second before setting it down. "What did they say?" I asked. "That the delivery must be completed in 6 minutes." "What happens in 6 minutes?" "They didn't say." The blue light above the unmarked door blinked once. Marina walked toward me and took the blank access card from the breast pocket of my vest. I hadn't realized she had seen me put it there. She turned it over. "No serial number," she said. "No employee code. Casino cards always have both. So it's fake or temporary." "That's better." "No." The overhead ventilation slowed with a descending whine. For several seconds, the air in the corridor stopped moving. The smell changed. Beneath the lemon cleaner and recycled air came something sharper, hot plastic, maybe, or dust, heated inside an electrical cabinet. Marina noticed it too. She lifted her radio, pressed the talk button, and said, "Hospitality supervisor to facilities." Possible electrical odor, West Private Corridor, level 17. Static answered. She tried again. Nothing. Dead spot, I asked. There aren't supposed to be dead spots up here. The call panel chimed behind us. Room 18. 5 minutes, according to the small digital timer that had appeared beneath the number. 0500. Then 0459. Was that timer there before? I asked. No. Can a guest control that? No. Marina walked back to the pantry phone and dialed security. She waited. Her fingers tapped once against the counter, then stopped. No answer. You have Cal's number. Personal phones are prohibited on the floor. You had yours downstairs, and I had no signal. The timer continued. 0441. A door opened somewhere beyond the unmarked room, not the door itself. Something farther away, followed by a muted burst of voices and the brief scrape of furniture. Marina looked toward the sound. There's no occupied salon past 18, she said. You're sure? I make the service assignments. I wanted to ask whether this was some kind of test. Casinos tested employees. Mystery shoppers, surveillance audits, controlled spills to see whether staff reacted properly. I had heard stories during orientation about undercover compliance officers leaving cash on the floor or asking employees to ignore age checks. But the smell of hot plastic was getting stronger. Could be a drill, I said. Drills are announced to supervisors. Could be testing whether I follow instructions. Then you've already failed by discussing it. Good. Problem solved. She almost smiled, but the expression never formed. The timer reached 4 minutes. Then every light in the corridor went out. The dark lasted less than a second. Emergency strips came on along the baseboards, casting the walls in a dim reddish glow. The blue light above room 18 stayed lit. So did the call panel timer. 0357. From behind the walls came the rapid clicking of electrical relays. The service phone rang again. Marina answered immediately. This is Voss. This time I heard the voice clearly through the receiver. Delivery status. The words had a compressed, slightly distorted quality, as though routed through an internal intercom. Marina said, "We've had a lighting failure. I'm evacuating the corridor. Delivery status. Who is this? 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Marina pressed the hook down and cut the call. Now we leave, she said. We turned toward the service stair door. It didn't open. Marina shoved the push bar again. Nothing. A small electronic lock above the frame showed red. That's fail secure, she muttered. Isn't it supposed to unlock during a power problem? Yes, she swiped her badge. The reader gave one long tone. Denied. I set the tray on a console table and tried the door myself, leaning my shoulder into it. The frame didn't move. It was a solid fire door with a magnetic latch or electronic bolt, and whatever was holding it had engaged fully. Main corridor, I said. Marina shook her head. Other end. Past 18. So we go past it. We shouldn't. The call panel chimed again. 0319. The ordinary part of my mind kept trying to reduce the situation to policy. A bad card reader, a faulty backup circuit, someone in surveillance with an inappropriate sense of humor. Every casino had miles of wiring and hundreds of access points. Things failed, but failures were random. This didn't feel random. The timer was still counting. Marina took the bottle from the tray and examined the cap. "What are you doing?" Checking the seal. It was intact. She held the glass under the emergency lighting. No residue, no film. "You think someone tampered with them?" "I think somebody wants a new employee to carry an unlogged drink into a room I'm not authorized to enter." "Why?" "That's the part I don't know." The fire alarm panel at the end of the corridor began to beep. Not the full building alarm. A local warning tone. 3 short beeps. Pause. 3 short beeps. Marina went to it and lifted the clear plastic cover. The small display read, "Air handling fault zone 17W below it. Smoke detector bypass active. Is that bad?" I asked. Smoke detectors should never show bypass during occupied hours. Could maintenance have done it? Yes, but they're supposed to notify us. The timer reached 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The electrical smell had thickened. It coated the back of my throat. Somewhere overhead, a fan attempted to start, rattled hard, and stopped. "We need to move," I said. Marina removed a small key from behind her lapel pin and opened the alarm panel. Inside were rows of labeled switches and a red handset. "What's that?" "Fire command phone." She lifted it. No dial tone. She pressed the call button anyway. Nothing. Then came a heavy thump from the unmarked room. The blue light flickered. Another thump followed, lower this time, as though something had struck the inside of the door near the floor. Marina stared at it. "Guest could be in distress," I said, "or someone wants us to think that. Either way, we can't just stand here. We can if opening that door creates a bigger problem." A third impact hit the door. Then a man shouted from the other side. The words were muffled, but one was clear. "Help." I reached for the access card. Marina caught my wrist. "Wait. There's somebody in there. We don't know who. We know they're asking for help. You also know someone locked our exit." The way she said it made me hesitate. She released my wrist. The skin beneath her fingers was pale from the pressure. The timer displayed 0158. "Let me think," she said. "We have less than 2 minutes." "To what?" "That's exactly the problem." The man behind the door hit it again. "Fire," he shouted. That word came through clearly. Marina moved. She took the blank card, swiped it through the reader beside the unmarked door, and stepped back. Nothing happened. She tried again. The reader flashed blue. There was a mechanical click inside the frame. The door opened 3 inches and stopped against something. Smoke did not pour out. No flames appeared. Instead, a strip of black fabric bulged through the gap. The same heavy material the maintenance workers had been carrying. Marina put her fingers against the edge of the door and pulled. It opened another inch, then caught. "Something's blocking it," she said. A voice came through the opening. "Push it," male strained. "Who are you?" Marina asked. "Just open the goddamn door." "What's your name?" The man coughed. "Adrian." "Adrian what?" No answer. A new sound began inside the room, a high electronic chirping, regular and sharp. A medical alarm. I knew it from visiting my mother's facility. Pulse oximeter, patient monitor, something along those lines. The timer reached 0121. Marina looked at me. "Help me." We leaned against the door together. Whatever blocked it scraped across the floor in short, resistant jumps. I could hear glass clinking on the other side. Marina planted one foot against the wall and pushed harder. The gap widened, enough for me to see inside. Room 18 wasn't a gaming salon. It looked like one from the doorway. Green felt table, leather chairs, low amber lamps, black walls. But beyond the table stood a row of metal equipment cabinets, portable ventilation units, camera monitors, and two wheeled privacy screens like those used in hospitals. Thick cables ran across the carpet beneath rubber covers. One of the ventilation units had tipped onto its side and was vibrating against a chair. A man lay on the floor near it. He wore a white dress shirt and black trousers. His face was turned away. A clear oxygen tube ran beneath his nose, connected to a small metal cylinder. Another man was crouched beside him. This had to be Adrian. He appeared to be in his 40s, with close cropped dark hair and the flushed, sweating face of someone who had been exerting himself in a room with poor air. His suit jacket was gone. Blood covered one cuff of his shirt. "Move the table," he said. Marina squeezed through the opening sideways. "Evan, stay in the corridor." That lasted about 2 seconds. The fallen ventilation unit shuddered again. A shower of orange sparks snapped from the rear grille and landed on the black wall fabric. The material began to smolder, not flame. A thin gray thread of smoke crawled upward. I pushed through after Marina. "Fire extinguisher?" I asked. Adrian pointed toward the far wall. There, a red extinguisher was mounted beside a curtain. I grabbed it, pulled the pin, and aimed at the glowing patch. "Short burst," Marina said. I squeezed. White powder struck the wall with a violent hiss and filled the air. The smoldering stopped. The room vanished briefly in a chalky cloud that tasted bitter and dry. Adrian coughed into his elbow. "Turn that alarm off," he said. "What happened?" Marina asked. "The fan failed." "Why is he on oxygen?" Adrian didn't answer. Marina knelt beside the man on the floor and checked his neck for a pulse. "He's alive," she said, barely responsive. The medical chirping accelerated. Small monitor rested beside him, attached to his finger by a clip. Its display showed an oxygen saturation number dropping through the 80s. "Cylinder's almost empty," Adrian said. "Backup is in the lower service room." "Call medical," Marina told me. "The phones are dead. Use the emergency pull." I found a red alarm station near the door and pulled the handle. Nothing happened. No bell, no flashing strobes. Adrian watched me do it. "That won't work," he said. Marina turned toward him. "Why?" "Systems isolated." "By whom?" "We don't have time." The call panel timer, visible through the partially open door, reached 0. For 1 second, nothing changed. Then the blue light went out. The door slammed shut behind us. The sound was huge in the small room. I lunged for the handle. Locked. Marina was beside me immediately, swiping her badge. Denied. She tried the blank card. The reader on the inside flashed red. Adrian swore under his breath. "What happens now?" I asked. He stood and crossed to one of the equipment cabinets. "Now surveillance archives the room." "What does that mean?" "It means we have about 8 minutes before every recording in here is transferred off-site, and the local system wipes itself." Marina stared at him. "Why would it wipe itself?" Adrian opened the cabinet. Inside were stacked hard drives, video encoders, and labeled black storage cases. One label read, "Optical test light absorption," another read, "Subject consent, FORMS." Adrian pulled out a green oxygen cylinder. Empty. He checked another, also empty. The man on the floor made a soft choking sound. Marina looked at his monitor. "We need the backup cylinder," she said. "I told you," Adrian replied. "Lower service room." "How do we get there?" He pointed to a narrow steel door hidden behind the black curtain. "Freight elevator." My stomach tightened before he even pulled the curtain aside. The door was smaller than a normal elevator entrance, barely wide enough for a hospital trolley. Above it, an old floor indicator showed only 3 positions. B2, sub. The arrow pointed down. Marina looked at me. She knew. "No," she said. "We find another way." "There isn't one," Adrian replied. "You're telling me this room has a private elevator to a sub-basement." It was a cash transfer lift before the renovation. "Is it operational?" Usually. The monitor chirped faster. Marina knelt beside the unconscious man and adjusted his airway, tilting his head and checking his mouth for obstruction. "How long at that level?" I asked. "Not long," she said. "He needs oxygen and medical care now." Adrian pressed the elevator call button. Machinery engaged somewhere below us. A cable groaned inside the wall. I stepped backward. The room seemed suddenly too small. The locked main door, the burnt electrical smell, the powder hanging in the air, the dark fabric stapled over every reflective surface. "Evan," Marina said. I was breathing too quickly. I knew it and couldn't stop. The elevator indicator moved from sub to B2. Adrian looked at me, then at Marina. "What's wrong with him?" "Nothing," Marina said. "Open the elevator." The floor beneath my shoes gave a faint vibration as the lift approached. I remembered my father kicking the hospital doors, the hollow bang, his voice telling me the cable had snapped even though it hadn't. The way he made his fear sound like fact until I believed it too. The indicator reached 18. The elevator doors parted with a grinding scrape. Inside was a narrow metal platform under a single fluorescent tube. Rust streaked the corners. There was no interior panel, only a key switch and an emergency stop button. A wheeled oxygen cart stood against the back wall. Empty, Adrian stared at it. "That shouldn't be here." "What?" Marina asked. "The cart. Someone brought the backups up." The unconscious man's monitor displayed 68. Marina grabbed the oxygen cart anyway and checked its brackets. No cylinders. Then she saw something on the elevator floor. A casino security radio. She picked it up. Cal's name was printed on a white inventory label across the battery. A smear of blood marked the push to talk button. The radio crackled in Marina's hand. For a moment, there was only static. Then Cal's voice came through, weak and broken by interference. "Don't bring the lift down." Marina pressed the button. "Cal, where are you?" A loud impact cut through the transmission. Cal sucked in a sharp breath. "Doors chained," he said. "They're still here." "Who is?" Static swallowed his answer. Then another voice came over the radio, much closer to Cal's microphone. "Send the trainee." The connection ended. The old elevator light flickered. Adrian reached for the key switch. Marina knocked his hand away. "No, The monitor behind us gave a continuous alarm. The number had fallen to 64. Adrian looked at the unconscious man, then at the elevator shaft. "Someone has to go down," he said. Marina tightened her grip on Cal's bloodied radio. The locked room filled with the dry electronic tone of a man running out of air. And from somewhere beneath the elevator platform, metal struck metal in a slow, deliberate pattern. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. The man on the floor stopped making noise before any of us decided what to do. That was worse than the alarm. The monitor kept sounding, a flat mechanical tone that filled room 18 and seemed to press against the black fabric on the walls. The number on the screen flickered between 63 and 64, then disappeared entirely. Marina dropped beside him. "Sir," she put 2 fingers against his neck, then leaned close to his mouth. "Pulse is there," she said. Shallow breathing. Adrian moved toward the elevator. "We go down." Marina looked up. "You first." He hesitated. It was brief, but she saw it. "So you know what's waiting," she said. "I know there's oxygen in the lower storage room." "That isn't what I said." The radio in her hand crackled. Static. Then 3 knocks came through the speaker, exactly like the sound beneath the elevator platform. Adrian backed away from the open lift. "What the hell is that?" Marina watched him carefully. "You tell us." "I don't know." "You knew about the wipe. You knew about the backup cylinders. You knew the alarm system was isolated." "I work here." "So do I, not in this department." "What department?" He looked toward the equipment cabinets instead of answering. I was still standing beside the elevator, close enough to smell the old machine oil inside it. My hands had gone numb again. The lift car was only 6 feet deep, maybe 4 feet wide, with a metal accordion gate folded against one side. The fluorescent tube overhead buzzed at an uneven pitch. Below the platform, something moved, not knocking now, scraping. I stepped back so fast my heel caught the oxygen cart. It rolled into the wall with a clang. Marina turned. "What?" "Something S under there." Adrian leaned into the elevator and looked down through the narrow gap between the platform and the shaft wall. The scraping stopped. He picked up the security radio and switched on its flashlight. The beam was weak, but enough to show cables, grease, and a metal bracket beneath the car. Then something pale swung into the light. I jerked away. Adrian shouted and dropped the radio. It hit the elevator floor. The pale thing swung again. A hand. For 1 second, none of us moved. Then Adrian crouched, reached into the gap, and pulled. A latex glove came loose from a cable, empty. It had snagged by 1 finger and inflated each time air moved through the shaft. Marina stared at it. "Maintenance glove," Adrian said. The explanation made sense. That didn't calm me. My body had already reacted, dumping heat into my chest and tightening every muscle as if I had been struck. I bent forward, hands on my knees. "Evan," Marina said, "I'm fine." "You're not." I said, "I'm fine." The edge in my voice surprised all of us. Marina gave me a second, then returned to the unconscious man. "First attempt," she said. "We get the main door open manually." Adrian shook his head. "Magnetic lock is controlled remotely. Every fire door has a mechanical override. Not that one." "Then show me the hinge side." The door back to the west corridor had no visible hinges from inside. The black wall fabric had been cut neatly around the frame, hiding the screws and wiring. Marina used the extinguisher bracket as a pry bar, working it under the fabric. The material was heavier than it looked, woven on the surface, rubberized underneath. When she pulled, staples snapped free one at a time. Pop, pop, pop. Behind it was plywood, not drywall. A second layer had been constructed over the original wall. Marina peeled more fabric away. A thick electrical conduit ran vertically beside the door. Above it sat a rectangular lock control box with no access cover, only a seam around the edge. "There," she said. Adrian knelt beside her. "That's powered from the surveillance rack. Can it be cut?" "It'll default locked." "It's already locked." "It can deadbolt." "Can you open the box?" "Not without the security bit." Marina looked around. Room 18 was roughly rectangular. The main door and hidden elevator occupied the south wall. The gaming table sat in the center. The equipment cabinets lined the north wall. Portable ventilation units and medical monitors were arranged along the east side. On the west side, a black curtain concealed a smaller observation area containing 2 folding chairs, a camera tripod, and a narrow sink. No windows. No visible vents except the disabled portable units. I searched the drawers beneath the sink and found gauze, alcohol wipes, syringes still in sealed packaging, adhesive electrodes, and a compact toolkit. Here, the kit had precision screwdrivers, hex keys, and security bits. Adrian looked at it and swore. "What?" Marina asked. "That kit isn't ours." "How can you tell?" "Ours are red. The case I held was blue, a ridiculous detail, but by then every wrong color felt intentional." Marina selected a star-shaped bit, opened the lock control box, and exposed a circuit board with labeled terminals. Adrian pointed. "Release relay should be there." "Should be. The wiring's been changed." 2 wires had been bridged with a small alligator clip. Marina removed it. The lights went out. The monitor stopped. For half a second, the entire room vanished. Then emergency lighting came on beneath the gaming table, low and red. The unconscious man's monitor rebooted. The main door remained locked. From the equipment cabinets came a rising series of electronic chirps. Adrian crossed the room and checked the screens. "What did you do?" he asked. "I removed the bypass." "You cut power to the local system." "You said the system was going to wipe." "It was transferring first." The central monitor displayed progress bars. Remote archive interrupted below it. Local purge initiated. A countdown appeared. 0600. "Can you stop it?" Marina asked. Adrian moved between keyboards, entering passwords. "Maybe. That isn't an answer." "It's the one I have." He typed faster. The timer dropped. 0542. One by one, the smaller surveillance screens went black. A final frame remained visible on the largest monitor. The baccarat salon from earlier, viewed from above. The suited man stood under the chandelier beside the woman. Her shadow stretched across the carpet. His did not. Then the image switched to a diagnostic view. The visible spectrum feed showed the room normally. The infrared feed showed both people clearly. The depth camera displayed wireframe outlines. A 4th image labeled polarization filter, rendered the man as a dark figure against the floor, nearly indistinguishable from the carpet. Adrian killed the screen. Too late. That's the shadow thing, I said. No, he replied. It literally says optical test. You don't understand what you're looking at. Then explain it, he kept typing. Marina moved between us. Later, door first. The main lock clicked. We all turned. Marina grabbed the handle and pulled. The door opened 2 inches, then stopped. She pulled harder. Something metallic rattled on the other side. Chained, she said. Cal's warning came back to me. Doors chained. They're still here. Marina put her eye to the gap. The west corridor emergency lights were still on. From where she stood, she could see the service pantry to the left and the main private corridor to the right, beyond the curve of the wall. What do you see? I asked. Chain looped through the outer handle and around the console leg. Can we cut it? Not from here. Adrian pushed beside her and shouted through the gap. Hey, his voice traveled down the corridor. No answer, he shouted again. A service cart rolled slowly into view. No one was pushing it. The same high wheel squealed as it moved. Squeak, roll, squeak, roll. It crossed the corridor and bumped against the opposite wall. I stared through the gap. For a few seconds, the cart stood there trembling. Then a man rose from behind it. Not stood, unfolded. He had been crouched on the lower shelf. Marina slammed the door shut before I saw his face. A heavy object struck the outside. Once, twice. The chain snapped tight against the handle. Adrian backed away. Who was that? Marina asked. I don't know. You expect me to believe that. The person outside hit the door again, not trying to break it, testing it. Then footsteps moved away toward the main corridor. The squeaking cart remained. Marina kept one hand on the handle and listened until the steps faded. Attempt 1 failed, she said. Door opens, but the corridor is controlled. The purge timer hit 4 minutes. Adrian returned to the terminal. I need the footage. Why? I asked. Because if it wipes, we lose proof. Proof of what? He stopped typing. His face looked different under the red floor lights. Older, more frightened. That somebody changed the protocol tonight. What protocol? He looked at the unconscious man. That. The man on the floor had a name on the inside collar of his shirt. DHOLLIS. Marina saw me looking. Daniel Hollies, she asked Adrian. He nodded once. Who is he? A consultant. For what? Optics. The purge timer reached 0331. Daniel's monitor read 61. Marina checked his pulse again. We don't have time to save recordings and him. Adrian's hands stopped over the keyboard. There it was, the choice he had been avoiding. He closed the transfer window. Then we go down. The second attempt was to send only the empty lift. Adrian said the car could be lowered remotely from the key switch inside room 18, then called back if the lower landing was clear. Marina didn't trust the shaft, the controls, or him, but it was better than putting all 3 conscious people inside at once. We loaded Cal's radio onto the elevator floor and wedged the extinguisher beneath the rear rail so it would not roll out. Marina pressed the transmit button. Cal, the elevator is coming down empty. Put the oxygen inside if you can. Static answered. She repeated the message. A weak voice came through. Don't. It might have been Cal. It might have been a recording. Adrian turned the key. The accordion gate closed. The lift descended. The indicator moved from 18 toward B2. Metal scraped inside the shaft. The car stopped once, shuddered, then continued. We listened through the wall. At B2, the machinery stopped. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then the radio transmitted. We heard footsteps. Slow. A door creaked. Someone breathed close to the microphone. Marina pressed her radio button. "Cal," a voice answered. "Send Evan." It was the same speaker as before, but clearer now. Male, American accent, no obvious distortion. Marina said, "Bring the oxygen to the lift." The voice laughed once, not loudly. "We already did." Adrian checked the indicator. The lift had begun rising by itself. "That's impossible," he said. "You sent it," I said. "I didn't call it back." "Can they control it from below?" "Yes." "Then it isn't impossible." The car rose past B2. The cables strained. A rhythmic bump came through the shaft. Something inside was striking the wall. The indicator reached 18. The elevator doors opened. The extinguisher was gone. Cal's radio was gone. In their place stood a full green oxygen cylinder. A white luggage tag had been tied around the valve. My name was written on it. Marina did not let me touch it. She checked the cylinder pressure, then used an alcohol wipe from the sink kit to clean the valve and regulator connection. "Could be contaminated," she said. "With what?" Adrian asked. "I don't know." That answer getting familiar, she ignored him. The pressure gauge showed full. The cylinder hissed when she cracked the valve. No unusual odor, no residue. She connected it to Daniel's oxygen line and increased the flow. The monitor numbers rose slowly. Daniel coughed. His eyes opened for a moment, unfocused, then closed again. "Daniel," Adrian said, "can you hear me?" His lips moved. Marina leaned closer. "What?" Daniel whispered one word. "Mirrors." Then he began shaking. Not violently. Fine muscular tremors in his arms and jaw. Marina checked his pupils. "One's larger," Adrian swore. "What does that mean?" I asked. "Head injury, stroke, drugs," Marina said. "Several things. None good." There was blood matted behind Daniel's right ear, hidden by his hair. The injury had not come from the ventilation unit. Someone had struck him. The purge countdown reached 0. The equipment cabinets shut down in sequence. Fans stopped. Status lights disappeared. The only remaining illumination came from the red floor strips and the elevator tube. Then the room's ventilation died completely. The air changed within a minute. Warm, stale, thick with extinguisher powder and burnt insulation. Adrian tried the terminal. "Nothing. No records," he said. "Forget the records," Marina replied. "How long before the air becomes dangerous? With 3 people, 1 patient on oxygen, and no circulation, 4 people." He looked at me. "Maybe 20 minutes before carbon dioxide becomes noticeable. Less if the fire damaged wiring inside the wall." A faint crackle came from the east side. The black fabric near the portable ventilation unit had begun to smoke again. Not where I had sprayed, higher up, inside the wall. Marina pulled more fabric away. Heat rolled from the plywood beneath it. "The fire S in the cavity," she said. The extinguisher was gone. The only remaining suppression system was bypassed. Attempt 2 had given us oxygen, but it had taken away the tool that could keep the room from burning. Adrian grabbed the water bottle from the tray. "Not enough," Marina said. "We have the sink." The faucet gave one weak cough and stopped. No water pressure. I found a stack of linen napkins in a cabinet. Marina soaked them with the remaining bottled water and packed them against the hottest section of wall. Steam rose immediately. Adrian pulled the plywood panel with the pry bracket. It flexed, but did not break. Behind it, something popped. A section of fabric ignited near the ceiling. The flame was small, blue at the base, orange at the edge. It moved sideways along adhesive behind the material. We dragged Daniel toward the elevator. He was heavier than he looked, dead weight through the shoulders and hips. Adrian took his legs. Marina and I lifted under his arms. My lower back seized halfway. I almost dropped him. "Hold him," Marina snapped. "I am. You're not." I said. "I have him." We got him onto the metal platform, laying him beside the cylinder. Smoke gathered under the ceiling. The main door was still chained from outside. The fire behind the west wall was spreading toward it. There was only one route left: down. Marina stepped into the elevator with Daniel. "Evan, you can stay until I send it back." "No," she looked at me. I was afraid, so afraid that my teeth hurt from clenching them. But staying alone in a locked room filling with smoke was worse, and sending Marina below with Adrian felt like its own kind of abandonment. "I'm going," I said. Adrian entered last. The platform sagged slightly under our combined weight. The fluorescent tube flickered. Marina pulled the accordion gate closed. Behind us, the black wall fabric tore free with a long, ripping sound and collapsed in flames. Heat pushed into the lift. Adrian turned the key toward B2. Nothing happened. He tried again. The motor engaged, then stopped. "Too much weight," he said. "What's the limit?" Marina asked. 400 kilograms. We're under that. With the cylinder and cart, maybe not. We are not leaving him. I didn't say him. He looked at me. Marina moved between us. "Try sub." Adrian turned the key one position farther. The car lurched. My shoulder hit the wall. The platform dropped 6 inches before the cable caught. I made a sound I had never heard from myself. Marina grabbed my wrist. "Look at me." Smoke pushed through the elevator doorway. The main room fire had reached the ceiling. "Evan," I focused on her face. "Breathe slower." The lift began descending. The doors to room 18 closed above us, sealing with a metallic slam. The indicator passed B2 without stopping. Adrian twisted the key back. No effect. "We missed the landing," he said. "Stop it," Marina ordered. He hit the emergency button. It sank into the panel. The elevator continued down. "What did they do to it?" he asked. The fluorescent light died. Darkness closed over us. The car kept dropping toward sub. Above, through the shaft, came the muffled roar of fire. Below, another set of elevator doors opened before we reached them. A strip of white light appeared under the platform. Lift descended toward it. Marina tightened her hand around mine. There was no way to call the car back, no way to climb up. And when the platform passed the lower threshold, steel shutters dropped into place above us, cutting off the shaft with a crash that shook dust from the walls. The elevator settled at sub. The doors opened. Behind us, the gate locked automatically. point of no return. Ahead lay a narrow concrete passage lit by fluorescent tubes, running 20 yards toward a red security door. On the left, a room marked medical storage stood open. On the right, a darker branch corridor led toward old cash handling cages. Cal lay halfway between the elevator and the red door. He was on his side. His shirt was dark with blood. Someone had tied one ankle to a floor pipe with electrical cable. Beyond him, at the edge of the darker corridor, a man stepped backward out of the light. He was wearing the charcoal suit from the baccarat salon. Under the fluorescent fixtures, his shadow should have fallen across the concrete. Instead, the floor beneath him was covered with the same black optical fabric as room 18. He looked down at it, then at us. "Now," he said, "we can begin again." The man in the charcoal suit stepped fully into the light. His name was Graham Vale, 47 male, though I didn't learn that until Marina said it. "Mr. Vale." She spoke carefully, still gripping my wrist. Graham's expression didn't change. "You remember me," he said. "I remember everyone who makes staff sign separate non-disclosure agreements." Adrian looked at her. "You know him, board consultant," Marina said. "Risk management." Graham smiled at that. "Close enough." Behind him, the old cash handling corridor disappeared into shadow. The black optical fabric had been taped across the floor and halfway up the concrete walls. Under the fluorescent tubes, it absorbed enough contrast that his shoes seemed detached from the rest of him. That was the trick. No missing shadow, just a surface engineered to hide it. Cal lifted his head. "Don't listen," he said. His voice barely carried. Blood had soaked the right side of his uniform shirt from ribs to waistband. The wound looked like a puncture or narrow cut, not a gunshot. His face was gray beneath the fluorescent light. Marina stepped out of the elevator first. "Evan, stay with Daniel." Graham shook his head. "No," Evan comes forward. Daniel lay on the elevator floor beside the oxygen cylinder, breathing through the nasal tube. His monitor showed 71, better than before, still bad. Adrian crouched over him. "What do you want with the kid?" he asked. Graham looked at me. "Verification." "For what?" "That he reacts the same way." I didn't understand. Then I saw the mirrors. They were mounted behind the open red security door at the far end of the passage. Tall, narrow panels on wheeled frames, angled toward one another. Some were ordinary glass. Others were smoked, polarized, or coated in a dark film. Daniel's warning, mirrors. Graham followed my gaze. "Mr. Holly's designed a controlled visual environment," he said. "Low reflectance materials, polarized light, directional illumination, camera filters, simple things arranged precisely." "You locked us in a burning room for a lighting test?" Marina asked. "No." His eyes moved to Adrian. "I locked you in because he attempted to copy restricted footage." Adrian rose slowly. "That footage showed what you were doing to people, what we were showing people. You induced panic. We measured it with oxygen deprivation." Graham's face hardened for the first time. "That was not part of the protocol." Daniel stirred on the floor. His hand dragged weakly across the metal platform. Graham glanced at him, then back at Adrian. "You altered the purge sequence." "You hit him," Adrian said. "I restrained him when he became violent." With what? A steel pipe. Cal made a small sound that might have been a laugh. He means the flashlight, Cal said. Heavy one. Graham's gaze snapped toward him. That was the moment I understood Cal had seen everything, and that Graham could not let us leave. Marina understood too. Her posture changed. Not much. A slight shift of weight onto the balls of her feet. How many people are down here? She asked. Only us. Your man with the service cart. Gone. The person who chained the door. Gone. You expect us to believe they walked away. I paid them to follow instructions, not remain after the job was done. Graham reached inside his jacket. Marina froze. He removed a black key fob, not a weapon. He pressed a button. The red security door behind him closed. The magnetic lock snapped into place. Then he pressed another. The elevator doors began to slide shut behind us. Adrian lunged backward and jammed his foot between them. The motor strained. Help me, he shouted. I grabbed the accordion gate and pulled. Marina seized the oxygen cylinder by the collar and dragged it across the threshold. Daniel's tube stretched tight. Graham moved toward us. Cal hooked his restrained leg around Graham's ankle. It wasn't enough to trip him. It was enough to slow him. Graham kicked Cal in the ribs. Cal folded with a wet grunt. Marina launched herself at Graham. They hit the wall together. The key fob flew from his hand and skittered onto the black fabric. It vanished visually, not literally. I heard it bounce twice, but against that material, under those lights, it disappeared. The elevator doors kept closing. Adrian's shoe bent sideways under the pressure. He screamed. I pulled the gate with both hands. Nothing. Emergency stop, Marina shouted. It didn't work. Use the toolkit. The blue toolkit was still wedged beneath Daniel's legs. I dropped beside him, opened it, and grabbed the thickest screwdriver. The door gap was down to 4 inches. Adrian's foot was trapped up to the ankle. I jammed the screwdriver into the track. The tip slipped. Metal shaved across my knuckles. I tried again. This time it caught between the door and frame. The doors pressed inward. The screwdriver bent, but stopped them. Adrian tore his foot free and collapsed. His shoe remained in the gap. Marina and Graham fought beneath the fluorescent tube. He was stronger. She was faster. She drove her thumb into his eye. He shouted and grabbed her hair, slamming the side of her head against the wall. Once, twice. The sound was dull and awful. She sagged. Graham turned toward me. Blood ran from one nostril. Get away from the elevator, I stood. My right hand was bleeding from the screwdriver. I could feel each heartbeat in the cut. Evan, Marina said. She was on one knee, blinking hard, one hand pressed to the wall. Graham stepped closer. You were never meant to be hurt, he said. That helps. You were selected because you were new. No expectations. No established response pattern. Selected for what? To enter the room, see the visual effect, and report what you believed you saw. You trapped me. The fire was not planned. The oxygen removed to create urgency. Cal interfered. Cal pushed himself upright. His fingers worked at the electrical cable around his ankle. Vale, he said, you always talk too much. Graham turned. Cal held the key fob. He had found it by touch on the fabric. He pressed a button. Nothing happened. Graham smiled. Biometric lockout. Then he reached for Cal. I grabbed the empty oxygen cart. It was light aluminum, built to hold 2 cylinders. I swung it sideways. The frame struck Graham across the shoulder. He stumbled. I swung again. He raised an arm. The cart hit his elbow and folded awkwardly. Pain shot through my wrist. Graham punched me in the mouth. I went down hard. Concrete scraped my cheek. My teeth cut through the inside of my lip. For a second, I could only hear the high electric hum of the ceiling lights. Then Cal shouted. Graham had taken the key fob back. He pressed it. The elevator doors crushed the bent screwdriver flat. The metal snapped. The doors closed. Daniel's oxygen line caught between them. The clear tube flattened. The monitor alarm jumped to a continuous tone. Marina crawled to the cylinder and yanked the line free, but the crushed section stayed pinched inside the door. No flow, she said. Daniel's oxygen number began dropping again. Graham backed toward the dark corridor. Stay where you are. He pressed another button. The fluorescent tubes shut off. Darkness swallowed the passage. Somewhere to my left, Marina cursed. Graham moved. I heard his shoes on the fabric, then lost them when he reached the concrete. That was what the black material really did. It erased more than shadows. It softened footsteps, hid dropped objects, broke depth, made people look in the wrong place. The emergency lights came on after 3 seconds. Low red strips along the floor. The mirrors behind the locked red door caught them and multiplied them. Thin red lines appeared everywhere, across the walls, across the floor, across us. Graham stood in the center of the mirrored setup, except there looked like there were 6 of him. Reflections overlapped at different angles. Smoked panels delayed the eye. Polarized film blacked out sections of his body depending on where I stood. He moved. Every reflection moved differently. I understood then what Daniel had built. Not invisibility, confusion. A room designed to make witnesses doubt their own sight. Graham's voice came from ahead. Evan walked toward me. I stayed down. Why? Because the biometric reader is keyed to a live palm, and the override requires a second person. Marina whispered near my right shoulder. He needs you to open something. The red door. No, the inner cage. Graham heard her. Yes. What's inside? I asked. Records. Adrian was crouched beside Daniel, trying to splice the cut oxygen line with a plastic connector from the medical kit. Records of what? He said. Graham's reflection turned. Of consenting participants. People you scared in controlled rooms until they couldn't tell what was real. People paid for perceptual research. Then why erase the footage? Because Adrian copied medical data. Adrian forced the connector into the line. The tube split farther. Damn it. Daniel's number hit 59. Marina looked toward the open medical storage room. Backup tubing. She started to rise and nearly fell. Blood ran from her hairline behind her left ear. I caught her arm. You're hurt. I know. She pointed at the storage room, 10 feet from us on the left side of the corridor. Get tubing. Green cabinet. Graham stepped out of the mirrors. One real figure among false ones. He had something in his hand now. A compact stun gun. He triggered it. Blue-white current snapped between the contacts. Don't. I stopped. He pointed it toward Marina. Evan goes to the reader now. Cal was still beside the floor pipe. His hands had stopped working at the cable. His eyes met mine, then moved to the ceiling. Above Graham ran an exposed sprinkler line. Red, painted steel. Old. A manual valve wheel stood near the medical storage door, tagged Zone Sub C. The fire system in room 18 had been bypassed. But this was a separate zone. Cal looked at the valve, then at the oxygen cylinder. I understood part of it, not all. Marina did. She whispered, "No sparks near oxygen." The cylinder was open, but the line was damaged. Oxygen leaked softly at the regulator. Graham advanced. Last chance. I raised my hands. Okay. I walked toward the mirrors. My legs felt detached from me. The red lines made the floor look uneven. Graham stayed 3 steps behind, close enough to use the stun gun, far enough that I couldn't grab him. The biometric reader was mounted beside a steel cage door beyond the mirror frames. Inside the cage were hard drives, paper files, cash boxes, and several sealed plastic bins. One bin had a hospital inventory sticker. Another was labeled with dates and initials. I placed my palm on the reader. Nothing. Other hand, Graham said. I used my bleeding right hand. The reader flashed yellow. Second authorization required. Graham stepped beside me and placed his palm on the lower panel. Green light. The cage lock clicked. At the same moment, Cal twisted the sprinkler valve. Water hammered through the overhead pipe. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then, a corroded joint above the mirror rig burst. A solid jet hit the ceiling and exploded across the corridor. The fluorescent emergency strips flickered. The black optical fabric darkened with water and peeled from the concrete. The mirrors clouded. Reflections vanished. Graham spun toward Cal. Marina grabbed the oxygen cylinder and shut the valve. Adrian pulled Daniel toward the medical room. I yanked the cage door open and stepped inside. Graham lunged after me. I slammed the door. His hand caught between the bars. He screamed and dropped the stun gun inside the cage. I kicked it away. He pulled his fingers free before I could close the latch, then drove his shoulder into the door. The cage swung inward. We went down among the storage bins. He landed on top of me. His forearm pressed across my throat. Water poured through the ceiling and spread across the floor. I reached blindly. My hand found a plastic bin. Too light, a cable, paper, the stun gun. I grabbed it. Graham saw. He trapped my wrist against the concrete. Don't. His face was inches from mine. One eye swollen from Marina's thumb. Blood and water ran together across his mouth. You think this makes you a witness, he said. You're a trainee with panic attacks and no clearance. They'll say you misunderstood. That was my flaw. The thing he had counted on. That I would doubt what I saw. That I would be embarrassed by fear. That I would let somebody calmer explain reality back to me. I drove my forehead into his nose. Cartilage gave with a soft crunch. He recoiled. I triggered the stun gun against his ribs. The first contact failed through the wet shirt. The second caught skin beneath his waistband. His body locked. He collapsed sideways, striking his head against the steel base of the cage, then stopped moving. I dropped the stun gun. For a second, I thought I had killed him. Then he inhaled, wet, ragged, alive. Marina reached the cage and pulled me out. We need to move. Adrian had found fresh oxygen tubing in the medical room. Daniel Daniel's number was climbing again, slowly. Cal had stopped answering. Marina knelt beside him. His eyes were open, but his breathing had become shallow and irregular. Cal, he looked at her. Valve worked. It worked. Good. She pressed both hands against his wound. Blood welled through her fingers. We have to get you upstairs. No lift. Then another route. He nodded toward the red door. Old Count Tunnel. Goes to loading dock. The biometric cage had opened when Graham used both authorizations. Inside, among the records, was a ring of mechanical keys. One key had a red tag. Marina took it. The red security door opened manually. Beyond it, a narrow concrete tunnel sloped upward. No lights, no clean route, but air moved through it, cold and real. Adrian and I lifted Daniel using a folded privacy screen as a makeshift stretcher. Marina tried to help Cal stand. He couldn't. His right leg buckled immediately. We dragged him onto the second half of the screen. The climb was slow, brutal. Every few yards we had to stop. Daniel vomited once and nearly aspirated. Adrian rolled his head sideways and cleared his mouth with gauze. Marina stumbled repeatedly. Her speech began to slur. Cal lost consciousness halfway up. Behind us, Graham groaned inside the cage. Then metal rattled. He was trying to stand. We kept moving. The tunnel ended at a steel hatch beneath the loading dock. The red key opened it. Cold ocean air came through the gap, carrying diesel exhaust and salt. A delivery driver saw us emerge. He stared. Marina said, "Call 911. He did. No sudden rescue. No perfect response. The first ambulance took 11 minutes. Police arrived in 14. Daniel was intubated on the pavement. Marina collapsed beside the loading bay and began seizing before paramedics stabilized her. Cal still had a pulse when they loaded him. He died before reaching Atlantic Care. Graham was arrested in the sub-basement with a fractured nose, electrical burns, 2 broken fingers, and a skull fracture from the cage base. He survived. Adrian disappeared during the confusion. One moment, he was beside Daniel's stretcher. The next, he was gone. Police searched the casino. They did not find him. The fire in room 18 triggered a larger alarm after heat damaged the bypass wiring. Guests were evacuated from 2 floors. Smoke spread into the west service corridor, but never reached the public gaming area. By sunrise, the blue light above the unmarked door was dark. The black fabric had burned away in places. Underneath, it were ordinary walls, plywood, staples, wires, nothing supernatural. That should have made me feel better. It didn't, because everything that happened had been designed by people, and people could rebuild it. The first person who asked me what happened was a paramedic kneeling on the loading dock. The second was a police officer. The third was a casino attorney. That order mattered. The paramedic wanted to know whether I had lost consciousness. The officer wanted to know who had hurt Cal. The attorney wanted to know whether I had entered a restricted area voluntarily. I was sitting on the rear step of an ambulance with a foil blanket around my shoulders and dried blood on my shirt. My mouth had swollen enough that certain words came out wrong. Every few seconds, somebody rolled a gurney past me or shouted for equipment. and the loading dock doors opened to release another push of warm air and smoke from inside the casino. The attorney stood several feet away behind a police sergeant. He wore a navy overcoat over a suit and held no umbrella, though a cold drizzle had started blowing in from the ocean. "Mr. Mercer," he called, "I need to clarify one point." The sergeant turned. "You need to step back. I represent the property. You can represent it from over there." The attorney looked at me as though we shared a private inconvenience. "Did you use an unauthorized access card?" I tried to laugh and split my lip open again. The paramedic pressed gauze against it. "Don't talk," she said. I looked at the attorney anyway. "Yes," he started to speak. "So did the man who locked us in," I added. The sergeant pointed toward the far end of the dock. "That's enough." The attorney went. Not far. Just beyond the yellow bollards, where he immediately started making calls. By then, Graham had been brought out in restraints. He was strapped to a backboard because of the head injury. His face had swollen around the nose and left eye. One hand was bandaged, and both wrists were secured to the frame with soft cuffs. He saw me. There was no dramatic recognition, no threat. He simply watched as the paramedics rolled him past. That was worse. He looked calm again, as if the night had already become a disagreement about procedure. They took me to Atlantic Care Regional Medical Center in the second ambulance. I asked about Marina 3 times during the ride. The medic kept saying she was in another unit, and that seizure activity after a head injury did not always mean permanent damage. He would not answer when I asked about Cal. I knew before anyone told me. There is a way medical workers avoid names when they cannot give you good news. They say the patient, the officer, your colleague. They keep people grammatical. At the hospital, I was given 5 stitches inside my lower lip and 4 across my right hand. X-rays showed a hairline fracture in my wrist and no facial fractures. A nurse cleaned extinguisher residue from my ear canals and kept asking whether I had inhaled smoke. I said no. Then I coughed black flecks into a paper cup. They kept me overnight. Every time the room door closed, I watched the gap beneath it. Every time the elevator bell sounded in the hallway, my chest tightened. At 4 a.m, a detective came in. Her name was Detective Lena Ortiz, 42, female, assigned to the Atlantic City Police Department's Major Crimes Unit. She had damp curls, a plain gray blazer, and the exhausted patience of someone who had been called away from sleep and intended to extract something useful from it. She pulled a chair beside the bed. "You can stop whenever you need to." "I don't want to stop." That usually changes halfway through. It did. I told her everything from the first drink order to the Count Tunnel. She did not interrupt often. When she did, it was for geography. Which side was the medical room on? How far from the elevator was Cal? Could Graham see the red door from where he stood? Was Adrian present when Vale described the testing? She made me draw the sublevel on the back of a hospital meal menu. The map looked childish. A rectangle for the elevator, a line for the passage, a square marked Cal, a dark branch for the cages. When I finished, Ortiz turned the paper around. "You're sure the man from the Baccarat salon was Vale?" "Yes. You had seen him once before, for maybe 10 seconds. Under poor lighting, yes. You were under stress." "Yes." She watched me. I could hear Graham's voice. "You're a trainee with panic attacks and no clearance." "They'll say I misunderstood," I said. Ortiz set down her pen. "Somebody chained a fire exit. Somebody disabled alarms. Somebody stabbed a security officer and restrained him in a sub-basement. We found your blood in the cage and Vale's prints on the control fob." She tapped the map. "This is not resting on whether you interpreted a shadow correctly." I looked toward the hospital window. Dawn had begun turning the glass a weak gray. "What about the records? Some survived. How many? I'm not discussing evidence details. Was it just him? I'm not discussing that either." "Did the casino know?" She leaned back. "The casino is a building. Buildings don't know things, people do." That sounded like something she had said before. Did people know? Yes. She did not elaborate. Marina remained unconscious for most of the next day. Her injury was worse than mine. A skull fracture near the left temple, bleeding around the brain, and damage to her shoulder from the fall near the cage. Doctors monitored her in intensive care. She did not require surgery, but for nearly 36 hours, nobody could tell us whether she would wake without serious impairment. Daniel Hollies was placed on a ventilator. Cal was pronounced dead at 12:48 a.m. The official cause was blood loss from a stab wound that had damaged his liver. The weapon was found 2 days later behind an electrical cabinet in B2 receiving. A narrow maintenance knife, wiped clean, except for blood inside the hinge. The casino issued a statement before noon. It called the incident an unauthorized criminal misuse of decommissioned service areas by outside contractors and one former consultant. Graham Vale had never been a casino employee, according to the statement. Technically, that was true. He was paid through a risk analysis firm registered in Delaware. The optical testing program had also never appeared on the casino's departmental budget. It had been funded through renovation contracts, security upgrades, guest experience research, and consulting retainers distributed across 4 fiscal years. Technically, it did not exist, but rooms do not wire themselves. Someone had approved the plywood walls. Someone had ordered the black fabric. Someone had bypassed the detectors. Someone had scheduled new employees to carry drinks past controlled lighting setups and then recorded what they noticed. Police found 11 files connected to room 18. 9 participants had signed consent forms. The language described visual environment research and workplace attention testing. It did not mention oxygen restriction, locked exits, medical monitoring, or deliberate emergency simulation. 2 files contained no signatures. One was mine. The other belonged to an employee who had quit the Silver Crest 7 months earlier. Detective Ortiz would not give me the name, but a local reporter found it. Mason Reed, 24, male, had worked overnight room service for 6 weeks. He left without notice after being written up for abandoning a tray outside a restricted salon. His former roommate told the reporter that Mason had become convinced the casino was altering lights whenever he entered certain hallways. He had moved to Pennsylvania. He refused interviews. The reporter called me 5 times. I refused to. For the first week, I spoke only to police, doctors, my mother, and the attorney the union arranged, even though I had not been employed long enough to join. My mother knew something had happened before I told her. She saw the stitches during a video call. "What did you do?" she asked. "Work accident. You always were a terrible liar." Her name is Carol Mercer, 64, female, and she had been living with progressive mobility problems for 3 years. She hated the assisted living facility, hated being helped into showers, hated the laminated activity schedule taped beside her door. She also hated the idea that I had taken casino work for her. When I finally told her the broad version, she listened without interrupting. Then she said, "You're quitting. I need the insurance." "Not from them. I'm already enrolled, Evan. The hospital bill alone, I would rather owe money." "You don't get to decide that for me." "No," she said, "but I get to decide whether you use me as an excuse to walk back into a place that nearly killed you." That landed because it was true. My mother had become the respectable version of my fear. Whenever I wanted to avoid admitting I was trapped, I said I was being responsible. 90 days, insurance, bills, practical things. The casino placed me on paid administrative leave. It also offered me a settlement. The first offer arrived through an email marked confidential. It covered medical costs, 6 months of wages, and counseling. In exchange, I would agree not to discuss internal security practices, restricted spaces, research activities, or personnel. My lawyer read it twice. "They're not asking you to lie," he said. "They're asking me not to talk. That's often more valuable." I did not sign. The second offer doubled the wages. I did not sign that either. I wish I could say it was courage. Mostly, it was Cal. I had known him less than an hour. He had still wrapped his leg around Graham's ankle when he could barely breathe. He had opened the sprinkler valve, knowing he could not get himself out. Taking the money felt like allowing the casino to turn him into another procedural problem. Marina woke on the second evening. Her first clear sentence was, "Did the trainee faint?" The nurse thought she was confused. I laughed so hard my wrist hurt. When I visited 4 days later, Marina was sitting upright with one side of her head shaved. Her left eye did not track quite as quickly as the right. She spoke slowly and became irritated when she lost words. She remembered room 18. She remembered Cal. She did not remember the Count tunnel. "I keep seeing red lines," she told me. Were there red lines? Emergency lights reflected in the mirrors. Good, good. I was worried I invented that. We sat quietly. A hospital television played a daytime court show with the captions turned on. After a while, Marina said, "I'm not going back." "Neither am I. You decide that already." My mother did. That produced a small smile. Then she asked, "Did Adrian make it?" "No one knows." Police had found no employment record under the name Adrian matching his description. His fingerprints were recovered from the room 18 equipment, but they did not match any criminal database. The surveillance footage that might have shown him leaving the loading dock was missing 18 minutes due to a network interruption during the fire evacuation. Detective Ortiz believed he had used a false name and been employed by one of the subcontractors. She also believed he had copied some of the room 18 data before the purge. 3 weeks after the incident, an encrypted drive arrived at the Atlantic County Prosecutor's office. It contained partial medical logs, internal emails, lighting diagrams, and payment records connecting Graham's company to 2 casino executives and a private behavioral research firm. There was no return address. Adrian was never located. Graham was charged with aggravated assault, kidnapping, conspiracy, tampering with evidence, false imprisonment, and offenses connected to Cal's death. He denied striking Daniel and claimed the lockdown had been an emergency containment measure after Adrian sabotaged the system. 2 contracted maintenance workers were later arrested for chaining the West Corridor door and removing emergency equipment. 1 accepted a plea deal. The casino's vice president of security resigned. A facilities director was charged with falsifying inspection records. No senior executive went to jail. The Silver Crest paid fines, settled several civil claims, and closed the private gaming level for renovation. 6 months later, it reopened under a different name. Cal's funeral was held at a church in Ventnor. The security department attended in uniform. So did executives I had never seen before. They stood near the back and looked appropriately devastated. Cal's daughter spoke about him teaching her to change a tire in the rain. His older brother told a story about Cal returning a wallet with $600 inside when they were teenagers. Nobody mentioned how he died. Afterward, Marina and I stood beside the parking lot while traffic moved along Ventnor Avenue. She used a cane then, mostly for balance. I still wore a wrist brace. "I keep thinking I should have called him sooner," she said. "You tried. I should have gone downstairs with him. He told us not to. I was his supervisor that night." "You were hospitality." She looked at me. "Buildings don't know things," I said. "People do." She recognized the line. "Ortiz." "Yeah." Marina watched the cars. "I knew there were rooms I wasn't supposed to ask about. That isn't the same as knowing." "No," she said, "but it isn't nothing." We did not solve that guilt. People like clean endings because they make suffering feel organized. One person knew. Another did not. One person was brave. Another was responsible. Reality was messier. Marina had ignored odd procedures because casinos ran on odd procedures. Cal had followed orders until he understood what they concealed. I had walked toward a blue light because I needed health insurance. Months passed. Daniel survived. He had permanent hearing loss in one ear, weakness on his left side, and gaps in his memory. Through his attorney, he admitted designing the visual systems, but said he believed they would be used for camera calibration and casino security research. He became a cooperating witness. Marina completed physical therapy and took a scheduling job with a shipping company in Pleasantville. No elevators, 1 floor. I found work maintaining inventory for a medical supply distributor. The warehouse had no public gaming floor, no mirrored corridors, no rooms numbered 18. It did have a freight elevator. For the first 2 months, I used the stairs. Then one afternoon, I had to move a pallet of saline to the 2nd floor, and the elevator was the only practical option. I stood in front of it for nearly 10 minutes. The doors opened, empty car, White walls, rubber floor, a scratched capacity plate. Nothing hidden. I pushed the pallet inside and pressed 2. When the doors closed, my hands started shaking. I let them. The car rose. No jolt. No voice through a radio. No light changing blue. When the doors opened, I pushed the pallet out and went back to work. That was as close to recovery as I got. Not fear disappearing, just fear becoming something I could carry without obeying. The silver crest eventually demolished the partition around room 18. Photos released during the civil case showed stripped plywood, cables hanging from the ceiling, and rectangles of cleaner paint where equipment cabinets had stood. The black fabric was removed as evidence. Most of it was destroyed after testing. One section remained in police storage. I know because Detective Ortiz showed me a property log when I gave my final deposition. There were 23 rolls listed. 22 had evidence disposal dates. The last entry had no disposal date. No transfer signature either. Just a handwritten note beside the inventory number, released to authorized representative. I asked Ortiz who that meant. She read the line twice. Then she closed the folder. Probably an administrative error. Probably. A year after Cal died, I took my mother to lunch on the boardwalk. She had a new motorized chair and drove it too fast through crowds. The Silver Crest stood 3 blocks north, its glass reflecting the afternoon sky. We did not go inside. We ate pizza from paper plates and watched gulls fight over crusts near the rail. Behind us, casinos blinked and chimed through open doors. Ordinary sounds. Coins that were not coins. Applause triggered by machines. Music arranged so nobody noticed how much time had passed. As the sun lowered, shadows stretched east across the boards. My mother's chair cast one. Mine fell beside it. Everyone walking past us had one too. I checked. I still check sometimes. Not because I believe shadows can disappear, because I know how little it takes to hide one. A different surface, a different angle, a person telling you not to stare. The shadows fade for now, but the stories never end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and join our community of horror lovers. If you're hungry for more, check out the next video. Just remember, the scariest part is often the one you don't see coming.